Imagine trying to win a complex game without knowing the rules. You'd be lost, frustrated, and subject to the whims of chance, moving your pieces blindly across a board whose logic escapes you entirely. What if I told you that your entire life is that game? And for centuries, the rulebook has been hidden in plain sight, passed down through whispers and symbols, waiting for those with eyes to see. This rulebook is called the Kybalion, and it contains the 7 Hermetic Principles, the alleged source code that governs all of creation, from the spiraling dance of galaxies to the silent movements of your own mind. These are not mere philosophical musings or abstract concepts for intellectual debate. These are the operational laws of reality itself, the invisible architecture upon which every experience, every manifestation, every moment of your existence is constructed. The pain you feel is the gnawing sensation of chaos and unpredictability that haunts your daily experience. It is the frustration of efforts that sometimes bear fruit and sometimes wither without apparent reason, leaving you to wonder whether success is merely a matter of luck or divine caprice. You set intentions, you visualize, you affirm, and yet the results remain maddeningly inconsistent, as if the universe itself is playing favorites or operating on a whim you cannot fathom. This is the agony of the player who does not know the rules, who moves through life reactively, buffeted by forces they can neither predict nor control. We live in an age where fragments of ancient wisdom have been repackaged and sold as modern revelations. We learn about individual laws like cause and effect, or the increasingly popular law of attraction, and we attempt to apply them in isolation, hoping they will transform our circumstances. But these are just single rules extracted from a much larger, interconnected system. And trying to use one without understanding the others is like attempting to fly a plane by only knowing how the rudder works. You might move in a certain direction, but you will never achieve true flight, never experience the mastery that comes from understanding the complete operational manual. The rudder is useless without knowledge of the throttle, the flaps, the principles of lift and drag, and so too are isolated spiritual laws when divorced from their systemic context. The promise I offer you today is nothing less than the revelation of the complete 7-law system, the full physics of consciousness that has been jealously guarded by initiates and mystics for millennia. This is not another fragmented teaching or a single technique to add to your collection. This is the master blueprint, the unified field theory of mental and spiritual causation. When you understand how these 7 principles interact and interpenetrate, you will no longer be a player stumbling through the game of life. You will become a master of it, moving from the plane of effects to the plane of causes, from the realm of chance to the domain of conscious creation. The teachings I am about to share with you are rooted in the Hermetic tradition, attributed to Hermes Trismegistus, the legendary figure known as the scribe of the gods and the founder of the ancient mystery schools. These principles are not new inventions of the modern self-help movement. They are the ancient foundation upon which many of the masters you have studied built their entire work. Neville Goddard, Wallace Wattles, Joseph Murphy, all of them were drawing from this same wellspring whether they acknowledged it explicitly or not. The Kybalion, published in 1908 by 3 anonymous authors calling themselves the 3 Initiates, distilled these teachings into accessible form for the modern seeker, and today you stand at the threshold of that same revelation. Here is the pact I make with you. In this video, we will systematically unlock the 7 lost Hermetic principles from the Kybalion, not as abstract philosophy, but as practical tools for conscious living. You will learn not only what each principle is, but how these laws interact with one another, forming a coherent system that governs everything from the movement of planets to the formation of your next thought. More importantly, you will discover how to consciously use these principles to become a cause, rather than an effect in your own life, to step out of the stream of unconscious reaction and into the realm of deliberate creation. This is not about gaining power over others. It is about reclaiming the power that is already yours by birthright, the power that has been obscured by ignorance and misunderstanding. But I must tell you something that will become crucial as we progress through this teaching. One of these 7 laws is known among initiates as the Master Key. If you understand this one law above all others, if you truly grasp its implications and learn to apply it consciously, You can command the rest with far greater ease and precision. This principle is the foundation upon which all the others rest, the central axis around which they revolve. I will reveal which one it is, and why it holds this supreme position in part 4 of this presentation, but for now, let this question simmer in your awareness as we build the foundation of understanding. Before we begin this journey together, I ask you to pause and reflect. Which of life's rules do you find most confusing? Which patterns in your experience seem most random or incomprehensible? Leave a comment below sharing your thoughts, and if you are ready to decode the source code of reality itself, subscribe to this channel and join the Master's legacy. To understand the 7 principles, we must first understand the soil from which they grow, the fundamental axiom that gives birth to all the others. The Kybalion presents itself as the essence of the teachings of Hermes Trismegistus, a figure who exists at the intersection of history and legend, revered in ancient Egypt as Thoth, the god of wisdom, and in Greece as Hermes, the messenger of divine knowledge. Whether Hermes was a single historical person, a title passed down through generations of priest philosophers, or a mythological representation of eternal wisdom itself, is less important than the teachings attributed to him. These teachings have survived millennia, influencing everything from ancient Greek philosophy to Renaissance alchemy to modern metaphysics, because they contain something that resonates with the deepest structure of reality itself. The core foundation of Hermetic philosophy, the first and most fundamental of the 7 principles, rests on a single earth-shattering axiom that changes everything once you truly comprehend it. The all is mind, the universe is mental. Read those words slowly and let them penetrate beyond the surface of intellectual understanding. This is not a poetic metaphor or a comforting spiritual platitude. This is a statement about the fundamental nature of existence. The universe itself, in all its apparent solidity and materiality, is a mental creation held in the mind of a universal consciousness that the Hermeticists called the All. Every star, every atom, every thought you have ever had, every sensation you have ever felt, all of it exists within this infinite mind, and our individual minds are not separate from it, but rather focal points within it, localized expressions of the one universal consciousness. Consider what this means for a moment, setting aside your habitual assumptions about the nature of reality. If the universe is mental, then the primary substance of all things is not matter, but consciousness itself. Matter, energy, time, space. These are not the fundamental building blocks from which consciousness somehow emerges. Rather, they are patterns within consciousness, forms that consciousness takes when it moves in certain ways. You have been taught to think of your mind as a product of your brain, a biological computer running software called consciousness. But the Hermetic teaching inverts this entirely. Your brain is a pattern within consciousness, a focal point through which the universal mind experiences a localized perspective. The implications of this reversal are staggering and will become clearer as we explore each of the 7 principles. This principle of mentalism is not merely the first principle chronologically, it is the master principle, the one from which all others derive their meaning and power. If you do not grasp this foundational truth, the other 6 principles will seem like separate, unrelated laws, interesting perhaps but not unified into a coherent system. But once you understand that everything is mental, that consciousness is the primary reality and all else is derivative, then the other principles reveal themselves as descriptions of how this universal mind operates. They are the grammar and syntax of the mental language in which reality is written, the rules by which thought becomes form, by which the invisible becomes visible, by which the potential becomes actual. Why has this teaching been kept hidden, passed down through mystery schools and encoded in symbols and allegories? Partly because the uninitiated mind recoils from such a radical proposition, clinging to the apparent solidity of matter as proof of an external, objective world independent of consciousness. Partly because this knowledge, when truly understood and applied, confers a degree of power that could be dangerous in the hands of those who lack wisdom and ethical development. But primarily because this truth cannot be taught in the ordinary sense. It must be realized, experienced, awakened to from within. The words can point the way, but you must walk the path yourself, testing these principles against your own experience until they cease to be beliefs and become direct knowledge. Think about the moments in your life when you have glimpsed this truth, even if you did not recognize it at the time. Those instances when your perception shifted and suddenly the world looked different, when a change in your mental state seemed to change the very quality of reality around you, when synchronicities piled up so thickly that the boundary between inner and outer began to dissolve. These were not coincidences or anomalies. They were moments when the mental nature of reality became briefly transparent to you, when the veil thinned and you caught a glimpse of the source code beneath the surface appearance. The Kybalion offers you a systematic way to make those glimpses permanent, to live consciously in the awareness that you are not a separate self navigating an objective world, but a focal point of consciousness creating your experience from within. The principle of mentalism also explains why all spiritual and metaphysical teachings ultimately converge on the practice of working with consciousness itself through meditation, visualization, affirmation, contemplation, or any other method that directly engages the mind. If the universe is mental, then the most direct way to change your experience of reality is to change your mental state, your habitual patterns of thought and feeling, your underlying assumptions about what is possible and what you deserve. This is not positive thinking in the superficial sense of papering over problems with cheerful affirmations. This is the deep work of reprogramming the operating system of your consciousness, aligning your individual mind with the creative power of the universal mind. As we prepare to explore the 6 additional principles that flow from this foundational truth, hold this awareness. You are not learning about external laws that govern you from outside. You are learning about the internal structure of the consciousness in which you live and move and have your being. The mental matrix that you have always been using unconsciously and can now learn to use with deliberate intention. The game has always been mental. The rules have always been mental. And the player, the game board, and the pieces are all mental as well. What changes now is that you are waking up within the game, becoming conscious of the rules that have been operating all along. Consider how this principle reframes every question you have ever asked about manifestation, success, relationships, health, or any other area of life. If the universe is mental, then asking, "How do I get what I want?" is revealed as the wrong question, because it assumes a separation between you and what you want, between consciousness and its contents. The right question becomes, how do I align my individual mind with the creative power of the universal mind? How do I think and feel in harmony with the mental laws that govern manifestation? This shift in questioning opens up entirely new possibilities, moving you from the paradigm of manipulation and control to the paradigm of alignment and flow. The ancient Hermeticists encoded this teaching in the maxim, as within, so without, as above, so below. But this is not merely a statement about correspondence between different levels of reality. It is a statement about the primacy of the mental realm. The within is not just correlated with the without. The within creates the without, molds it, shapes it, determines its form and content. Your external circumstances are not random events happening to you. They are the outward expression of your inner mental state, the physical manifestation of your habitual thoughts, beliefs, and emotions. This is why changing external circumstances without changing internal consciousness produces only temporary results. The old mental patterns reassert themselves and recreate the old conditions. The principle of mentalism also illuminates why different people can experience the same objective situation in completely different ways, extracting entirely different meanings and having entirely different emotional responses. If reality were purely objective and material, this would be mysterious. But if reality is fundamentally mental, then it makes perfect sense. Each person is not experiencing the situation itself, but rather their mental interpretation of the situation, their consciousness interacting with the universal consciousness to create a unique, subjective experience. Two people standing in the same room are, in a very real sense, standing in two different rooms, because the room they experience is not the objective room, but the rumors filtered through their individual consciousness. This understanding liberates you from the tyranny of circumstances, from the belief that your happiness, success, or fulfillment depends on arranging external conditions in a particular way. External conditions are certainly real within the framework of the mental universe, and they matter, but they are secondary, derivative, effects rather than causes. The primary creative power lies in consciousness itself, in the quality of your mental state, in the patterns of thought and feeling you habitually maintain. Change these, and the external conditions must eventually conform, because they are made of the same mental substance and operate according to the same mental laws. This is not wishful thinking or magical fantasy. This is the logical consequence of taking seriously the principle that the universe is mental. As we conclude this exploration of the foundational principle, prepare yourself for what comes next. The 6 remaining principles will describe the specific ways in which this mental universe operates, the patterns and rhythms and polarities that characterize the movement of consciousness as it creates the infinite variety of forms we call reality. Each principle will add another layer of understanding, another dimension of mastery, until you possess the complete system. But never forget that all 6 of the remaining principles rest on this foundation. The all is mind, and therefore, everything that follows is a description of how mind works, how consciousness creates, how the mental universe unfolds according to knowable, learnable, applicable laws. The ancient initiates who guarded this teaching understood that to know this principle intellectually is one thing, to realize it experientially is quite another, and to embody it fully, to live from this awareness moment by moment, is the work of a lifetime. But the journey begins with the first step, and that step is the recognition that you have been living in a mental universe all along, using its laws unconsciously, creating your experience without realizing you were doing so. Now you are waking up to the game, learning the rules, preparing to play consciously rather than unconsciously, to create deliberately rather than by default, to make the principle of mentalism more than an abstract concept, to help you feel its truth rather than merely think about it. Let us use an analogy that you already understand intimately, the experience of dreaming. When you are dreaming at night, the entire dream world, the people you encounter, the places you visit, the physics that govern how objects behave, is a creation of your mind. There is no external dream world that exists independently of your consciousness. The dream and the dreamer are two aspects of a single mental process. The dream characters seem to have their own autonomy, making choices and speaking words you did not consciously script, yet they are all products of your own mind, different facets of your consciousness, playing different roles in the drama. Now here is the crucial insight. To change the dream, you do not argue with the dream characters or try to manipulate the dream environment through physical force within the dream. If you are having a nightmare and you want to change it, the solution is not to fight the monsters or run from the danger, because these actions are still operating within the dream logic, accepting the dream as fundamentally real. The true solution is to change your own mental state, to become lucid within the dream, to recognize that you are dreaming and that the entire experience is a creation of your consciousness. Once you achieve lucidity, the dream responds instantly to your mental state. You can fly, walk through walls, transform nightmares into pleasant experiences because you have recognized the mental nature of the dream reality. The Hermetic Philosophy teaches that this entire waking reality operates on the same principle, though at a higher and more complex level. We are living inside what might be called a universal dream, a mental creation of the infinite consciousness that the Hermeticists called the All. The difference between your nightly dreams and this waking dream is not one of kind, but of degree. This waking dream is more stable, more consistent, more densely populated with other focal points of consciousness who are also dreaming it into being. But the fundamental nature is the same. It is mental, not material. It is consciousness creating form, not form creating consciousness. The laws of this universal dream are the 7 Hermetic principles that we are exploring together. Just as your nightly dreams have their own internal logic and consistency, gravity usually works, people usually behave in recognizable ways, Cause and effect usually follow predictable patterns. So too does this waking dream have its laws, its patterns, its operational principles. But these laws are not external constraints imposed on consciousness from outside. They are the ways in which consciousness habitually organizes itself, the patterns it naturally follows when creating the experience we call physical reality. Understanding these laws is like becoming lucid in the dream of waking life. You recognize the mental nature of reality and learn to work with it consciously rather than unconsciously. Consider how this analogy illuminates the futility of trying to change your life by manipulating external circumstances alone. If you are having a nightmare and you are not lucid, you might spend the entire dream trying to fix the external situation, building better defenses, acquiring more weapons, finding safer hiding places. But all of this effort is exhausting and ultimately futile because you have not addressed the source of the nightmare, which is your own mental state. The moment you become lucid and recognize that you are dreaming, all that struggle becomes unnecessary. You can change the dream instantly by changing your consciousness, by shifting your mental state from fear to peace, from victimhood to empowerment. The same principle applies to your waking life, though the changes may unfold more gradually due to the greater density and stability of this collective dream we call physical reality. You can spend your entire life trying to fix external circumstances, getting more money, finding the right relationship, achieving the perfect body, acquiring status and recognition. And while these things may bring temporary satisfaction, they do not address the fundamental source of your experience, which is your own consciousness. The external world is the dream, your consciousness is the dreamer, and the Hermetic principles are the laws that govern how the dreamer creates the dream. This is why the ancient masters emphasized the transformation of consciousness as the primary spiritual work, why they taught meditation, contemplation, and mental discipline rather than external rituals and material manipulations. They understood that if you change the dreamer, the dream must change. If you transform your consciousness, your experience of reality must transform, because the experience is not separate from the consciousness that creates it. This is not a denial of the reality of the physical world or an excuse to ignore practical action. It is a recognition of the proper order of causation, the understanding that consciousness is primary and matter is secondary, that mind creates form rather than form creating mind. When you truly grasp this analogy, when you feel in your bones the truth that you are consciousness dreaming a world into being rather than a body navigating an objective world, everything changes. Your relationship to circumstances shifts from reactive to creative, from defensive to generative, from fearful to empowered. You stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and start asking, "What am I creating? What mental state am I maintaining that is generating this experience? How can I shift my consciousness to align with what I truly desire?" These are the questions of a lucid dreamer, of someone who has awakened within the dream and recognized their own creative power. The Kybalion teaches that the universe is not a random collection of events happening by chance or divine caprice. It is a magnificent, orderly cosmos operating on knowable laws, and these laws are mental laws because the cosmos itself is mental. Just as your nightly dreams follow certain patterns, symbols recur, themes develop, emotional tones pervade the entire experience, so too does the universal dream follow patterns, and these patterns are what we call the Hermetic principles. Learning these principles is like learning the grammar of the language in which reality is written, the syntax of the consciousness that creates all form. But here is the paradox that you must hold in your awareness. Even though the universe is mental and you are consciousness creating your experience, you cannot simply think your way to instant transformation through sheer willpower or positive affirmations alone. Why not? Because you are not the only dreamer in this collective dream, and because your individual consciousness contains layers and depths that extend far beyond your conscious awareness. Your subconscious mind, your habitual patterns, your deeply held beliefs and assumptions, these are all part of the mental substance that is creating your experience, and they do not change simply because your conscious mind decides they should. This is where the remaining 6 principles become essential, because they describe the specific mechanisms by which consciousness creates form, the particular patterns and rhythms and polarities that govern the mental universe. The principle of mentalism tells you that the universe is a dream. The other 6 principles tell you the laws by which the dream operates, the rules you must understand and work with if you want to become a conscious creator rather than an unconscious reactor. You cannot break these laws any more than you can break the law of gravity. You can only work in harmony with them or in opposition to them, and the quality of your life depends entirely on which choice you make. As we prepare to explore these 6 additional principles in detail, hold this foundational understanding. You are not learning about an external reality that exists independently of your consciousness. You are learning about the structure of consciousness itself, the patterns by which mind creates matter, the laws by which thought becomes form. The game you have been playing all your life is a mental game, and the rules have always been mental rules. What changes now is that you are becoming conscious of the game, learning to see the source code beneath the surface appearance, preparing to play with intention rather than by default. The ancient Hermeticists encoded this teaching in paradoxes and riddles because direct statement often fails to convey the depth of the insight. They said, "The lips of wisdom are closed, except to the ears of understanding," meaning that this knowledge cannot be given, it can only be awakened from within. But they also provided keys, tools, frameworks for understanding, and that is what the 7 principles offer you. A systematic way to decode the mental nature of reality, to recognize the dream as a dream, to become lucid in the waking state, and thereby gain access to the creative power that has always been yours. Remember the dream analogy as we move forward, because it will help you understand each of the remaining principles. When you read about vibration, think about how your emotional state in a dream colors the entire dream experience. When you read about polarity, think about how dream elements can flip from one opposite to another instantly. When you read about rhythm, think about how dreams have their own internal pacing and flow. Each principle describes an aspect of how consciousness operates when it is creating the experience we call reality, and understanding them is the key to mastering the dream rather than being mastered by it. The universe is mental. This is the foundation. The universe operates according to knowable mental laws. This is the structure. You are consciousness with the power to align yourself with these laws and thereby become a conscious creator. This is the promise. Now we will explore the architecture of these laws, the specific principles that govern how the mental universe unfolds, how consciousness creates the infinite variety of forms and experiences that constitute your life. The dream is about to become lucid. The game is about to reveal its rules. The source code is about to become visible to your awakening awareness. The first principle, which we have already explored as the foundation, is the principle of mentalism. The all is mind, the universe is mental. This is not merely one principle among 7, it is the master principle, the axiom from which all others derive their meaning and coherence. Everything that exists, from the smallest subatomic particle to the largest galaxy, from the simplest sensation to the most complex thought, is a mental creation, a pattern within the infinite consciousness that the Hermeticists called the All. Your mind is not a separate entity observing an external world. It is a localized expression of the universal mind, a focal point through which the infinite consciousness experiences itself from a particular perspective. Understanding this principle changes everything about how you approach life, because it reveals that the primary creative power in your experience is not external circumstances, but your own consciousness. If the universe is mental, then the most direct way to change your experience is to change your mental state, your habitual patterns of thought and feeling, your underlying assumptions about reality. This is not about denying the existence of the physical world or pretending that matter does not matter. It is about recognizing the proper order of causation, understanding that consciousness is primary and matter is secondary, that mind shapes form rather than form determining mind. The practical implications of this principle are staggering once you truly grasp them. It means that every limitation you experience, every obstacle you encounter, every problem you face exists first and foremost as a mental pattern, a structure within consciousness. The external manifestation is secondary, derivative, an effect rather than a cause. Therefore, the most effective way to address any challenge is not to attack it at the level of external circumstances alone, but to trace it back to its mental root, to identify the thought patterns, beliefs, and assumptions that are generating the unwanted experience. Change the mental cause, and the physical effect must eventually follow, because both are made of the same fundamental substance: consciousness. This principle also explains why different spiritual and metaphysical teachers throughout history, despite using different terminology and cultural frameworks, have all converged on the same essential practices: meditation, visualization, affirmation, contemplation, and other techniques that work directly with consciousness itself. If the universe is mental, then the most powerful technology for transformation is mental technology. Methods that allow you to reprogram the operating system of your consciousness to align your individual mind with the creative patterns of the universal mind. Every technique that truly works, regardless of its cultural packaging, is working with this fundamental principle. Consider how this principle illuminates the phenomenon of synchronicity, those meaningful coincidences that seem to violate the ordinary laws of probability and causation. If you think of yourself as a separate self in an objective world, synchronicities are mysterious, even miraculous. But if you understand that both your inner mental state and the outer physical events are patterns within one universal consciousness, then synchronicity becomes comprehensible. Your mental state is resonating with similar patterns in the larger field of consciousness, and these patterns manifest as external events that mirror your internal condition. The boundary between inner and outer is revealed as an illusion, a conceptual division imposed on the seamless wholeness of mental reality. The principle of mentalism also provides the foundation for understanding how manifestation works, why some desires materialize while others remain perpetually out of reach. It is not enough to consciously want something if your deeper mental patterns, your subconscious beliefs, your habitual emotional states, your unexamined assumptions, are broadcasting a different message. The universe responds to the totality of your mental state, not just to your conscious wishes. This is why affirmations and visualizations sometimes fail. They are working at the surface level of conscious thought, while the deeper levels of consciousness are running contrary programs. True manifestation requires alignment at all levels of consciousness, a coherence between your conscious desires and your subconscious patterns. Think about the moments in your life when you have experienced what might be called flow states, those periods when everything seems to work effortlessly, when obstacles dissolve, when opportunities appear as if by magic, when you feel connected to something larger than your individual self. These are moments when your individual consciousness is aligned with the universal consciousness, when your mental state is in harmony with the creative patterns of the all. The principle of mentalism teaches you that these states are not random gifts from the universe, but rather the natural result of mental alignment, and they can be cultivated through understanding and practice. The ancient Hermeticists understood that teaching this principle requires great care, because the uninitiated mind tends to misinterpret it in one of two ways. Some hear the universe is mental and conclude that nothing is real, that everything is illusion, that physical reality can be dismissed or ignored. This is a fundamental misunderstanding. The mental universe is absolutely real. It simply has a different nature than we have been taught to believe. Your experiences are real experiences. Pain is real pain. Joy is real joy. The physical world is a real manifestation of consciousness, not a mirage to be transcended. The point is not to deny reality, but to understand its true nature, and thereby gain the power to work with it consciously. Others hear this principle and conclude that they can instantly create anything they want through sheer mental willpower, that thinking about wealth will make them rich, that visualizing health will cure disease, that positive thoughts alone will transform their circumstances. This too is a misunderstanding, though a more subtle one. The principle of mentalism is true. The universe is mental, but consciousness is not simple or one-dimensional. Your total mental state includes layers and depths that extend far beyond your conscious awareness, and it exists within a larger field of consciousness that includes other minds, collective patterns, and what might be called the mental inertia of established forms. Changing your consciousness is the key to changing your reality, but this change must be deep, sustained, and aligned with the other principles we are exploring. The principle of mentalism reveals why knowledge alone is not enough for transformation, why you can intellectually understand spiritual teachings without experiencing any real change in your life. Intellectual knowledge exists at the surface level of consciousness, in the realm of concepts and ideas. But true transformation requires a deeper shift, a change in the underlying patterns of consciousness that generate your experience. You must move from knowing about the principle to knowing the principle, from thinking about consciousness to being conscious of consciousness, from understanding the teaching intellectually to embodying it experientially. As you contemplate this principle, notice how it reframes every question you have ever asked about personal development, manifestation, or spiritual growth. Instead of asking, "How do I get what I want?" you begin to ask, "How do I align my consciousness with what I desire? What mental patterns am I maintaining that create my current experience? How can I shift my awareness to resonate with the reality I wish to experience?" These are the questions of someone who understands that consciousness is primary, that the mental realm is the realm of causation, that changing your mind is the key to changing your world. The principle of mentalism is also the key to understanding the other 6 principles that follow, because each of them describes a particular way in which consciousness operates when it creates form. Vibration, correspondence, polarity, rhythm, cause and effect, gender. All of these are patterns within consciousness, laws that govern how the mental universe unfolds. Without the foundation of mentalism, these principles might seem like separate, unrelated laws, interesting but not unified into a coherent system. But once you understand that everything is mental, that consciousness is the fundamental reality, then each principle reveals itself as a description of how mind works, how thought becomes form, how the invisible becomes visible. Hold this principle in your awareness as we explore the remaining 6. The all is mind, and therefore everything you are about to learn is a description of mental laws, consciousness patterns, the grammar and syntax of the language in which reality is written. You're not learning about external forces that control you from outside. You're learning about the internal structure of the consciousness in which you live and move and have your being. The game has always been mental. The rules have always been mental. And now you are waking up within the game, becoming conscious of the source code, preparing to play with intention rather than by default. The ancient initiates who first formulated this principle understood that it represents both the beginning and the end of spiritual understanding. It is the foundation upon which all other knowledge rests, and it is also the ultimate realization toward which all spiritual practice points. To truly know that the all is mind is to know everything, because all other knowledge is contained within this single insight. But knowing it intellectually is easy, knowing it experientially, living from this awareness moment by moment, embodying it so completely that it becomes your natural way of being. This is the work of a lifetime, the great adventure of consciousness awakening to itself. As we move forward to explore the second principle, remember that we are not leaving mentalism behind, but rather building upon it, adding layers of understanding that will help you work with the mental nature of reality more effectively. Each principle is a tool, a lens, a key that unlocks a particular aspect of how consciousness creates form. Together, they constitute the complete operating manual for the mental universe, the full physics of consciousness, that you need to move from being an unconscious creator to a conscious master of your experience. The universe is waiting for you to wake up within it, to recognize your own nature as consciousness, to realize that you are not a separate self observing an external world, but rather a focal point of the infinite mind experiencing itself. This recognition is not the end of the journey, but the beginning, the moment when you stop being a victim of circumstances and start being a creator of reality. The principle of mentalism is your foundation. The remaining principles will be your tools, and your life will be your canvas, the space where you practice the art of conscious creation. The second principle is the principle of correspondence. As above, so below, as below, so above. This ancient maxim, which has echoed through mystery schools and esoteric traditions for thousands of years, contains within it a profound key to understanding the structure of reality. It teaches that there is a harmony, a resonance, a fundamental correspondence between the different planes of existence, the spiritual, the mental, and the physical. The patterns that govern the movement of galaxies are reflected in the patterns that govern the movement of atoms. The laws that operate in the invisible realm of consciousness are mirrored in the laws that operate in the visible realm of matter. And most importantly, for your practical purposes, your inner world of thoughts and feelings is directly reflected in your outer world of circumstances and experiences. This principle is not merely stating that there are similarities between different levels of reality. It is revealing something much more profound about the unified nature of existence. The universe is not a collection of separate realms operating according to different rules. It is a single, coherent whole in which the same fundamental patterns repeat at every scale and on every plane. The macrocosm contains the microcosm, and the microcosm reflects the macrocosm. This means that by studying any part of the universe deeply enough, you can gain insight into the whole, because the part contains the pattern of the whole within itself. This is why the ancient sages could contemplate a grain of sand or a drop of water and extract from it profound truths about the nature of existence. For your practical purposes, the most important application of this principle lies in understanding the correspondence between your inner mental and emotional state and your outer physical circumstances. Your external life is not random or arbitrary. It is a precise mirror of your internal consciousness. The quality of your relationships reflects the quality of your relationship with yourself. The abundance or scarcity in your material circumstances reflects the abundance or scarcity in your mental and emotional life. The degree of harmony or chaos in your environment reflects the degree of harmony or chaos in your thoughts and feelings. This is not a moral judgment or a suggestion that you are to blame for your circumstances. It is simply a description of how the mental universe operates according to the law of correspondence. Consider how this principle operates in your own experience. When you are in a state of inner peace and clarity, do you not notice that your external circumstances seem to flow more smoothly, that people respond to you more positively, that opportunities appear more readily? Conversely, when you are in a state of inner turmoil and confusion, do you not notice that your external world seems to reflect that chaos back to you, that obstacles multiply, that conflicts arise more frequently? This is the principle of correspondence in action. As within, so without. Your inner state is not just correlated with your outer circumstances. It is actively creating them, shaping them, determining their form and content through the law of mental resonance. The principle also reveals why it is futile to try to change your outer circumstances without first changing your inner state. You might succeed temporarily through sheer effort and willpower, but unless you transform the underlying mental and emotional patterns that created the unwanted circumstances in the first place, those circumstances will inevitably reassert themselves. This is why people who win the lottery often return to their previous financial condition within a few years, why those who lose weight through external discipline alone often regain it, why those who leave one dysfunctional relationship often find themselves in another that follows the same patterns. The external change was not matched by an internal change, and the law of correspondence inevitably restores the equilibrium between inner and outer. Understanding this principle also illuminates the true nature of what we call luck or fate. These are not external forces acting upon you from outside. They are the outward manifestation of your inner mental and emotional patterns. A person who habitually maintains thoughts of scarcity and limitation will experience circumstances that correspond to that inner state, and they will call it bad luck. A person who habitually maintains thoughts of abundance and possibility will experience circumstances that correspond to that inner state, and they will call it good luck. But neither luck nor fate is external. Both are the outer reflection of inner consciousness, the physical manifestation of mental causation operating according to the law of correspondence. The principle of correspondence also provides a key to understanding the nature of spiritual growth and transformation. As you evolve in consciousness, as you raise your mental and emotional vibration to higher levels, your external circumstances must inevitably shift to correspond with your new inner state. This is not magic or wishful thinking. It is the natural operation of a fundamental law. The universe is a unified whole, and it cannot maintain a permanent discrepancy between the inner and the outer. If you truly change within, the without must change to match. The question is not whether this will happen, but how quickly and how smoothly, which depends on the depth and consistency of your inner transformation. Think about the implications of this principle for your daily life and your long-term goals. It means that the most efficient way to change any aspect of your external circumstances is to first identify and transform the corresponding pattern in your inner consciousness. Want more abundance in your material life? Begin by cultivating a consciousness of abundance, a mental and emotional state of plenty rather than scarcity. Want better relationships? Begin by transforming your relationship with yourself, healing the inner divisions and conflicts that are being reflected in your outer interactions. Want more peace and harmony in your environment? Begin by establishing peace and harmony in your own mind and heart. The ancient Hermeticists used this principle as a tool for understanding the invisible realms of existence by studying the visible ones. They reasoned that if, as above, so below, then by carefully observing the patterns in the physical world, the cycles of nature, the movements of celestial bodies, the structures of living organisms, they could infer the patterns that operate in the mental and spiritual realms. This is the foundation of what later became known as the doctrine of signatures, the idea that the visible form of a thing reveals its invisible essence and purpose. While this approach can be taken too literally and become superstitious, the underlying principle is sound. The universe is a unified whole, and the same patterns repeat at every level. The principle of correspondence also explains why symbols and metaphors are so powerful in spiritual and psychological work. A symbol is not just an arbitrary sign, it is a correspondence, a point of resonance between different levels of reality. When you work with a symbol consciously, whether in meditation, visualization, or ritual, you are not engaging in meaningless fantasy. You are using the law of correspondence to connect your individual consciousness with larger patterns in the universal consciousness. The symbol acts as a bridge, a correspondence point, that allows energy and information to flow between the inner and outer, the above and below, the mental and physical planes. Consider how this principle reframes your understanding of prayer, affirmation, and visualization. These practices are not about trying to convince an external deity to grant your wishes or manipulating the universe through magical thinking. They are about establishing correspondence between your inner state and your desired outer circumstances, aligning your consciousness with the reality you wish to experience. When you visualize your goal with clarity and feeling, you are not creating a fantasy. You are establishing a mental pattern that must, according to the law of correspondence, eventually manifest in physical form if you maintain it consistently and with sufficient intensity. The principle also reveals why certain traditional spiritual practices emphasize the importance of environment, ritual, and sacred space. These are not arbitrary customs or superstitious behaviors, they are practical applications of the law of correspondence. By creating an external environment that corresponds to the inner state you wish to cultivate, whether through the arrangement of physical space, the use of specific objects, or the performance of particular actions, you are using the law of correspondence in reverse, allowing the outer to influence the inner, just as the inner influences the outer. The correspondence flows both ways, and the wise practitioner learns to use this bidirectional flow consciously. Understanding the principle of correspondence also helps you interpret the events and circumstances of your life with greater wisdom and insight. Instead of seeing external events as random or meaningless, you begin to read them as messages, as feedback from the universe about your inner state. A recurring pattern in your relationships is not just a coincidence, it is a correspondence, a reflection of something in your own consciousness that needs to be recognized and transformed. A persistent obstacle in your career is not just bad luck. It is a correspondence, an outer manifestation of an inner limitation or belief that requires your attention. The universe is constantly communicating with you through the law of correspondence, showing you the mirror of your own consciousness in the circumstances of your life. This principle also illuminates the true nature of what we call manifestation. Manifestation is not about forcing the universe to give you what you want through the power of positive thinking alone. It is about establishing correspondence between your inner consciousness and your desired outer reality, aligning your mental and emotional state with the experience you wish to have. When this correspondence is complete and consistent, when your inner state fully matches your desired outer state, manifestation becomes inevitable, not as a miracle, but as the natural operation of a fundamental law. The inner and outer must correspond. This is not a hope or a belief, but a description of how the mental universe operates. As you contemplate this principle, begin to observe the correspondences in your own life with fresh eyes. Notice how your inner state is reflected in your outer circumstances. Notice how changes in your consciousness precede changes in your experience. Notice how the quality of your thoughts and feelings is mirrored in the quality of the people and situations you attract. This observation is not about judgment or self-blame. It is about recognition, about seeing clearly the lawful relationship between consciousness and experience. Once you see this relationship clearly, you gain the power to work with it consciously, to use the law of correspondence as a tool for deliberate creation rather than unconscious reaction. The principle of correspondence is your reminder that you are not separate from your circumstances, not a victim of external forces beyond your control. Your inner world and your outer world are two aspects of a single unified reality, two sides of the same coin, two expressions of the same fundamental consciousness. Change one and you change the other. This is not a promise of instant transformation or a guarantee that you can have anything you want simply by wishing for it. It is a revelation of the lawful relationship between consciousness and experience, a key to understanding how the mental universe operates, a tool for moving from unconscious creation to conscious mastery. As above, so below, as within, so without. As you are in consciousness, so you are in experience. This is the law, and it operates with perfect precision whether you understand it or not. The third principle is the principle of vibration. Nothing rests, everything moves, everything vibrates. This principle reveals that the apparent solidity and stability of the physical world is an illusion created by the limitations of your senses. At the fundamental level, everything in the universe is in constant motion, vibrating at a particular frequency. The difference between what you perceive as solid matter and what you perceive as empty space is not a difference in kind, but a difference in the rate of vibration. The chair you sit on, the ground beneath your feet, the air you breathe, all of these are vibrating patterns of energy, and the only reason they appear different to your senses is that they vibrate at different frequencies. Modern physics has confirmed what the ancient Hermeticists taught thousands of years ago. Matter is not solid, but is composed of atoms, and atoms are not solid, but are composed of subatomic particles, and these particles are not solid, but are patterns of energy vibrating in space. The deeper you look into the structure of matter, the more it dissolves into motion, into vibration, into what can only be described as frozen music or condensed thought. The principle of vibration bridges the gap between the mental and the physical, showing how consciousness, which is itself a vibration, can create what we experience as solid, tangible matter simply by slowing down its rate of vibration. But the most important application of this principle for your practical purposes lies not in understanding the vibrational nature of physical matter, but in understanding the vibrational nature of your own consciousness. Your thoughts vibrate at a certain frequency. Your emotions vibrate at a certain frequency. Your overall mental and emotional state creates what might be called your dominant vibration, the characteristic frequency at which your consciousness habitually operates. This dominant vibration is not just a passive quality of your experience. It is an active creative force, attracting circumstances, people, and events that vibrate at a similar frequency. This is the true mechanism behind what has become known as the law of attraction. Consider how this principle operates in your own experience. When you are in a state of high vibration, joy, love, enthusiasm, gratitude, peace, do you not notice that you seem to attract positive experiences, that people respond to you warmly, that opportunities appear, that life flows more easily? Conversely, when you are in a state of low vibration, fear, anger, resentment, despair, anxiety, do you not notice that you seem to attract negative experiences, that conflicts arise, that obstacles multiply, that life feels heavy and difficult? This is not coincidence or imagination. It is the principle of vibration in action. Your consciousness is broadcasting a signal at a particular frequency, and the universe is responding by sending you experiences that match that frequency. The principle of vibration explains why affirmations and positive thinking alone often fail to produce the desired results. You can repeat positive words all day long, but if your emotional state, which is a vibration, remains in fear, doubt, or unworthiness, then your dominant vibration is not matching your conscious desires. The universe responds to the vibration you are actually emitting, not to the words you are saying or the thoughts you are thinking. This is why feeling is so crucial in any practice of manifestation or conscious creation. Feeling is vibration, and vibration is the language that the universe understands and responds to. Understanding this principle also reveals the true nature of what we call energy in spiritual and metaphysical contexts. When someone says they feel good energy or bad energy in a place or from a person, they are not speaking metaphorically. They are detecting actual vibrations, frequencies of consciousness that their own awareness is capable of sensing, even if their rational mind cannot explain the perception. Some people are naturally more sensitive to these vibrations than others, but everyone has the capacity to develop this sensitivity through practice and attention. The more conscious you become of your own vibrational state, the more clearly you can perceive the vibrational states of others and of environments. The principle of vibration also provides the mechanism for understanding how thoughts become things, how the invisible becomes visible, how consciousness creates form. A thought is a vibration in consciousness, a pattern of energy moving at a very high frequency. As this thought is sustained and charged with emotion, which is also vibration, it begins to slow down in frequency, to condense, to attract other vibrations that resonate with it. Over time, if the thought is maintained consistently and with sufficient emotional intensity, it continues to slow in vibration until it eventually manifests as physical form, as a circumstance or event in your material experience. This is not magic. It is the natural operation of the principle of vibration, the process by which high-frequency mental patterns descend through progressively lower frequencies until they become dense enough to be perceived as physical reality. Think about the implications of this principle for your emotional life and your mental hygiene. Every thought you think, every emotion you feel, every word you speak is setting up a vibration that radiates out into the universe and attracts similar vibrations back to you. This means that your habitual mental and emotional states are literally creating your future experiences, drawing toward you circumstances that match your dominant vibration. If you habitually maintain thoughts of lack and limitation, you are broadcasting a vibration of scarcity that will attract more scarcity. If you habitually maintain thoughts of abundance and possibility, you are broadcasting a vibration of plenty that will attract more abundance. The universe is not judging you or punishing you. It is simply responding to the vibration you are emitting, matching your frequency with corresponding experiences. The ancient Hermeticists taught that everything in the universe vibrates between two poles, and that the difference between different states of being is simply a difference in vibrational frequency. The difference between hot and cold is a difference in the rate of molecular vibration. The difference between light and dark is a difference in the frequency of electromagnetic waves. And most importantly for your purposes, the difference between fear and courage, between hate and love, between despair and hope, is simply a difference in the vibrational frequency of consciousness. This understanding is crucial because it means that you can change your emotional state, not just by changing your thoughts, but by consciously raising or lowering your vibration, by tuning your consciousness to a different frequency. This is the foundation of many traditional spiritual practices: chanting, singing, dancing, breathwork, and other techniques that work directly with vibration to shift consciousness. These are not primitive superstitions. They are sophisticated technologies for changing your vibrational state, for tuning your consciousness to higher frequencies. When you chant a mantra, you are not just making sounds. You are setting up vibrations in your consciousness that resonate with particular qualities or states of being. When you engage in rhythmic breathing, you are not just oxygenating your blood. You are entraining your consciousness to a particular vibrational pattern that can shift your entire state of being. The principle of vibration also explains the phenomenon of resonance, why certain people, places, or situations feel immediately comfortable or uncomfortable to you. Your consciousness is vibrating at a particular frequency, and when you encounter something that vibrates at a similar frequency, you experience resonance, a sense of harmony, recognition, or attraction. When you encounter something that vibrates at a very different frequency, you experience dissonance, a sense of discomfort, rejection, or repulsion. This is not about judgment or superiority. It is simply about vibrational compatibility. Two people can both be wonderful human beings, but vibrate at such different frequencies that they cannot comfortably be in relationship with each other. Understanding this principle also helps you navigate the challenge of maintaining a high vibration in a world that often seems designed to pull you down into lower frequencies. The news media, with its constant focus on fear and conflict, is broadcasting low vibrations. Negative people, with their complaints and criticisms, are broadcasting low vibrations. Your own habitual thought patterns, if they run toward worry and doubt, are generating low vibrations. To maintain a high vibrational state requires conscious effort, deliberate practice, and a willingness to guard your consciousness against influences that would lower your frequency. This is not about denial or avoidance. It is about conscious choice, about deciding what vibrational frequency you want to maintain, and then taking responsibility for maintaining it. The principle of vibration is also the key to understanding how healing works, whether physical, emotional, or spiritual. Disease, disharmony, and suffering are all manifestations of consciousness vibrating at frequencies that are out of alignment with health, harmony, and well-being. Healing occurs when the vibrational frequency is raised or realigned, bringing consciousness back into resonance with its natural state of wholeness. This is why so many healing modalities, from sound healing to energy work to prayer, focus on shifting vibration. They are not working directly on the physical symptoms. They are working on the underlying vibrational patterns that are generating those symptoms. As you contemplate this principle, begin to pay attention to your own vibrational state throughout the day. Notice what raises your vibration and what lowers it. Notice how your thoughts affect your feelings and how your feelings affect your vibration. Notice how your vibration affects the responses you get from others and the experiences you attract. This awareness is the first step toward mastering the principle of vibration, toward learning to consciously maintain the frequency at which you wish to operate. You cannot control every circumstance in your life, but you can control your vibrational state, and that control is ultimately the only control you need, because your vibration determines what you attract and how you experience whatever comes. The fourth principle is the principle of polarity. Everything is dual, everything has poles, everything has its pair of opposites. Like and unlike are the same. Opposites are identical in nature, but different in degree. Extremes meet. All truths are but half-truths. All paradoxes may be reconciled. This principle reveals one of the most profound and practical secrets of the universe. What we perceive as opposites are not actually separate things, but rather different degrees of the same thing, two poles of a single continuum. Hot and cold are not different phenomena, they are different degrees of temperature. Light and dark are not separate realities, they are different degrees of illumination. And most importantly for your transformation, love and hate, courage and fear, success and failure are not opposite states, but different points on the same spectrum. Understanding this principle changes everything about how you approach the challenges and negative states in your life, because it reveals that you do not need to fight against or destroy the negative pole. You simply need to shift your position on the spectrum to move your consciousness from one degree to another. You cannot eliminate cold by fighting against it, but you can eliminate it by introducing heat. You cannot eliminate darkness by battling it, but you can eliminate it by turning on a light. And you cannot eliminate fear by resisting it, but you can eliminate it by cultivating courage, which is simply fear transmuted to a higher degree on the same spectrum. The ancient Hermeticists called this process mental transmutation, and they taught that it is one of the most powerful tools available to the conscious mind. Transmutation is not about suppressing or denying the lower pole. It is about recognizing that the lower pole and the higher pole are the same substance vibrating at different frequencies, and that by changing the vibration, you can move from one pole to the other. This is the true alchemy, the transformation not of base metals into gold, but of base emotions into noble ones, of limiting beliefs into empowering ones, of unconscious reactions into conscious responses. Consider how this principle operates in the realm of your emotional life. When you experience hatred towards someone, the principle of polarity reveals that this hatred is actually love inverted, love vibrating at a very low frequency. The opposite of love is not hatred. It is indifference, the absence of any strong feeling at all. Hatred and love are both intense emotional connections. They both involve a powerful focus of attention and energy on the other person. The difference is only in the degree, in the vibrational frequency. This means that you can transmute hatred into love, not by forcing yourself to feel something you do not feel, but by recognizing the underlying energy and consciously raising its vibration, shifting it from the lower pole to the higher pole of the same spectrum. The same principle applies to fear and courage. Fear is not something separate from courage that must be eliminated before courage can exist. Fear is courage vibrating at a low frequency. The brave person is not someone who has no fear. They are someone who has learned to transmute fear into courage, to feel the same energy, but at a higher vibration. This is why courage is defined not as the absence of fear, but as action in the presence of fear. The energy is the same, only the degree has changed. When you understand this, you stop trying to eliminate fear and start learning to transmute it, to raise its vibration, to move it from the lower pole to the higher pole. The principle of polarity also explains why trying to avoid or suppress negative emotions and thoughts is ultimately futile and even counterproductive. What you resist persists, as the saying goes, because resistance is itself a form of attention and energy that keeps the negative pole active. The more you fight against fear, the more you energize it. The more you try to suppress anger, the more it builds pressure beneath the surface. The way to transcend the negative pole is not through resistance, but through transmutation, through recognizing it as the lower degree of something that can be raised to a higher degree through the conscious application of mental and emotional energy. Think about how this principle applies to the concept of success and failure in your life. These are not opposite states, but different degrees of the same thing, different points on the spectrum of achievement. Failure is not the opposite of success. It is success vibrating at a low frequency, success in an early stage of development. Every successful person has experienced multiple failures, not because failure is a necessary evil, but because failure and success are part of the same process, different degrees of the same learning curve. When you understand this, you stop fearing failure and start seeing it as simply a lower degree of success that can be transmuted into a higher degree through persistence, learning, and adjustment. The principle of polarity also reveals why paradoxes and apparent contradictions are so common in spiritual and philosophical teachings. The rational mind, which thinks in terms of either-or, is confused by statements that seem to affirm both sides of a contradiction. But the Hermetic understanding recognizes that all truths are half-truths, that any statement about reality captures only one pole of a dual reality. The universe is both deterministic and free, both unified and diverse, both absolute and relative, not because these are contradictions, but because they are different poles of the same truth, different degrees of the same reality. The wise person learns to hold paradoxes without trying to resolve them into simple either-or propositions. Understanding this principle also provides a powerful tool for dealing with the polarities in your external circumstances. When you are experiencing scarcity, recognize that scarcity and abundance are not opposites, but different degrees of the same thing, different vibrational frequencies of the same energy. You do not need to fight against scarcity. You need to transmute it into abundance by raising your vibration, by shifting your consciousness from the lower pole to the higher pole. When you are experiencing conflict in a relationship, recognize that conflict and harmony are different degrees of the same connection, and that the energy of conflict can be transmuted into the energy of harmony through conscious attention and intention. The ancient Hermeticists taught that the master of this principle gains the power to transmute any mental or emotional state into its opposite, to move consciousness up and down the spectrum at will. This is not about denying reality or pretending that negative states do not exist. It is about recognizing the true nature of polarity and learning to work with it consciously. The person who has mastered this principle does not get stuck in either pole. They understand that both poles are necessary, that the spectrum exists to provide range and variety of experience, and that true mastery lies in the ability to move consciously between the poles rather than being unconsciously pulled by them. Consider how this principle applies to the concept of good and evil, right and wrong, which has caused so much confusion and conflict throughout human history. The principle of polarity reveals that these are not absolute categories, but relative degrees on a spectrum. What is considered good in one context may be considered evil in another. What is right at one level of development may be wrong at another. This is not moral relativism or the denial of ethics. It is the recognition that moral categories are human constructs imposed on a reality that operates according to degrees rather than absolutes. The wise person learns to navigate this spectrum with discernment and wisdom, rather than rigid rules and judgments. The principle of polarity also explains the phenomenon of the dark night of the soul, those periods of intense suffering and despair that often precede major breakthroughs in consciousness. These are not punishments or meaningless trials. They are the lower pole of a polarity that is preparing to swing to the higher pole. The deeper you descend into darkness, the higher you can ascend into light. Because the extremes meet, because the intensity at one pole creates the potential for equal intensity at the opposite pole. The person who has never experienced deep despair cannot experience deep joy. The person who has never felt profound fear cannot feel profound courage. The poles define each other, and movement between them is what creates the dynamism and richness of conscious experience. As you contemplate this principle, begin to observe the polarities in your own life with new eyes. Notice how what you call negative emotions are simply the lower pole of positive emotions, how what you call problems are simply the lower pole of solutions, how what you call limitations are simply the lower pole of possibilities. Notice how the energy is the same at both poles, only the degree, the vibration, the frequency differs. And most importantly, begin to practice the art of mental transmutation, consciously raising the vibration of negative states, moving your consciousness from the lower pole to the higher pole through attention, intention, and the application of will. This is not positive thinking or denial. This is the conscious use of a fundamental law of the universe, the principle of polarity, to create the internal states and external circumstances you desire. The fifth principle is the principle of rhythm. Everything flows out and in. Everything has its tides. All things rise and fall. The pendulum swing manifests in everything. The measure of the swing to the right is the measure of the swing to the left. Rhythm compensates. This principle reveals that the universe operates in cycles, in waves, in rhythmic patterns that manifest at every level of reality. The seasons cycle from spring to summer, to fall to winter, and back to spring. The tides flow in and out with the pull of the moon. Your own body cycles through sleeping and waking, hunger and satiation, activity and rest. And your consciousness cycles through states of expansion and contraction, confidence and doubt, clarity and confusion, joy and sorrow. Understanding this principle is crucial because it prevents you from being surprised or discouraged by the inevitable downswings in your experience. Many people begin a spiritual practice or embark on a path of personal development with great enthusiasm and progress, only to become discouraged when they hit a period of difficulty or regression. They think they have failed, that the teachings do not work, that they are somehow inadequate. But the principle of rhythm teaches that these downswings are not failures. They are the natural operation of a universal law, the backward swing of the pendulum that must follow every forward swing. The universe operates in rhythms, and you cannot have the peak without the valley, the expansion without the contraction, the in-breath without the out-breath. The ancient Hermeticists taught that while you cannot prevent the operation of the principle of rhythm, it is a fundamental law that operates at all levels of reality. You can learn to neutralize its effects on your consciousness through the practice of what they called mental polarization. This is the art of establishing your consciousness at a desired point on the emotional or mental spectrum, and then refusing to be pulled by the backward swing of the pendulum. You do not stop the pendulum from swinging. You raise your consciousness above the plane on which the pendulum operates, establishing yourself at a center point that remains stable even as the rhythms continue to flow beneath you. Consider how this principle operates in the realm of your emotional life. You experience a period of great joy and enthusiasm, and then inevitably, that state begins to fade and you find yourself moving towards sadness or lethargy. This is not because something is wrong with you. It is the natural operation of the principle of rhythm. The pendulum swung to the right, and now it must swing to the left. But here is the key insight. The measure of the swing to the right determines the measure of the swing to the left. If you allow yourself to become excessively elated during the high periods, you will experience equally extreme depression during the low periods. The way to minimize the negative swing is not to suppress the positive swing, but to maintain a more centered, balanced state even during the peaks. To enjoy the high, without becoming attached to it or identified with it. This is the wisdom behind the Buddhist teaching of equanimity, the Stoic practice of maintaining an even mind, regardless of circumstances, the Taoist principle of the middle way. These are not teachings of emotional suppression or indifference. They are practical applications of the principle of rhythm. By establishing your consciousness at a centered point and refusing to be pulled to extremes in either direction, you minimize the amplitude of the pendulum swing, reducing both the heights of elation and the depths of despair. You still experience the full range of human emotion, but you are not at the mercy of the rhythm. You are working with it consciously rather than being unconsciously controlled by it. The principle of rhythm also explains the phenomenon of cycles in your external circumstances. Periods of abundance, followed by periods of scarcity, periods of success, followed by periods of challenge, periods of harmony, followed by periods of conflict. These are not random fluctuations or evidence that you are doing something wrong. They are the natural operation of a universal law. Everything in the universe moves in cycles, and your life is no exception. The wise person learns to recognize these rhythms, to prepare for the downswing during the upswing, to maintain faith during the valley that the peak will come again, to work with the cycles rather than fighting against them. Think about how this principle applies to the process of manifestation and goal achievement. You set an intention, you take action, and you begin to see progress. Then, inevitably, you hit a period where progress seems to stall or even reverse. This is the backward swing of the pendulum, the contraction that must follow the expansion. Many people give up at this point, thinking that their goal is not meant to be, or that they lack the ability to achieve it. But the principle of rhythm teaches that this is precisely the point where persistence is most crucial, because the backward swing is preparing the way for an even greater forward swing. The rhythm compensates. The deeper the valley, the higher the next peak. The ancient Hermeticists also taught that different rhythms operate at different scales and speeds. There are daily rhythms, monthly rhythms, yearly rhythms, and even larger cycles that span decades or lifetimes. The person who understands this principle learns to identify which rhythm they are experiencing at any given moment, and to adjust their expectations and strategies accordingly. During a period of high energy and expansion, it is appropriate to take bold action and push forward aggressively. During a period of low energy and contraction, it is appropriate to rest, reflect, consolidate gains, and prepare for the next expansion. Fighting against the rhythm is exhausting and futile. Working with it is efficient and empowering. Understanding the principle of rhythm also provides insight into the nature of what we call motivation and discipline. Motivation is itself subject to rhythm. It ebbs and flows, rises and falls, and you cannot maintain peak motivation at all times. This is why relying on motivation alone is a recipe for inconsistency and failure. Discipline is the practice of taking action regardless of where you are in the motivational cycle, of continuing to move forward even during the backward swing of the pendulum. The disciplined person does not fight against the rhythm. They simply do not allow the rhythm to determine their actions. They act from principle and commitment rather than from feeling and mood. The principle of rhythm also reveals why consistency and persistence are such powerful forces for achievement and transformation. When you maintain consistent action over time, you're not preventing the operation of rhythm. The pendulum continues to swing, but you are establishing a baseline of progress that continues even during the downswings. Each cycle builds on the previous one, creating a spiral of growth rather than a simple back-and-forth oscillation. This is why the tortoise beats the hare in the ancient fable. The tortoise maintains consistent forward movement regardless of the rhythms of energy and enthusiasm, while the hare is at the mercy of those rhythms. Consider how this principle applies to the phenomenon of beginner's luck, where someone experiences initial success in a new endeavor only to struggle later. This is the principle of rhythm in action. The initial upswing of the pendulum creates early success, but this is inevitably followed by a downswing, a period of difficulty and challenge. The person who understands this principle is not discouraged by this pattern. They recognize it as natural and use the downswing as an opportunity to deepen their skill, to address weaknesses, to build a more solid foundation. The person who does not understand this principle becomes discouraged, thinks they have lost their talent, or that the initial success was a fluke, and often gives up just before the next upswing would have occurred. The principle of rhythm also explains the importance of timing in human affairs, why certain actions succeed brilliantly at one time and fail miserably at another time even though the action itself is identical. This is because you are either working with the rhythm or against it. The master learns to sense the rhythms operating in their life and in the larger world, to plant seeds during the spring of the cycle and harvest during the fall, to act boldly during the expansion phase and consolidate during the contraction phase. This is not about passive acceptance of circumstances. It is about intelligent cooperation with the natural rhythms of reality. As you contemplate this principle, begin to observe the rhythms in your own life with greater awareness. Notice the cycles of energy and lethargy, confidence and doubt, progress and plateau. Notice how these rhythms operate at different scales, daily, weekly, monthly, seasonally. Notice how your resistance to the downswings creates suffering, while your acceptance and understanding of them creates peace. And most importantly, begin to practice the art of mental polarization, establishing your consciousness at a centered point that remains stable, even as the rhythms flow beneath you. This is not about suppressing your emotions or denying your experience. It is about learning to witness the rhythms without being identified with them, to remain centered in your essential self even as the surface of your consciousness moves through its natural cycles. The sixth principle is the principle of cause and effect. Every cause has its effect. Every effect has its cause. Everything happens according to law. Chance is but a name for law not recognized. There are many planes of causation, but nothing escapes the law. This principle reveals one of the most empowering truths you can grasp. There is no such thing as chance, luck, or random coincidence in the universe. Everything that happens is the result of causes that precede it, and everything you experience is the effect of causes that you or others have set in motion. The universe is not chaotic or arbitrary. It is a perfectly ordered system in which every event is connected to every other event through chains of cause and effect. Understanding this principle immediately shifts your relationship to your circumstances from victim to creator, because it reveals that you are not at the mercy of random forces beyond your control. Every condition in your life is an effect, and every effect has a cause. If you want to change the effects, you must trace them back to their causes and change those causes. This is the essence of personal power and responsibility, recognizing that you are not just experiencing effects, but also generating causes through your thoughts, emotions, words, and actions. You are not just a player in the game of life, you are also, to a large degree, the creator of the game board on which you play. The ancient Hermeticists made a crucial distinction between different levels of causation, recognizing that there are many planes of existence and that causes can originate on any of these planes. A physical effect might have a physical cause, but it might also have a mental or emotional cause operating on a higher plane. This is why two people can be exposed to the same physical conditions, the same virus, the same economic circumstances, the same challenging situation, and have completely different outcomes. The physical cause is the same, but the mental and emotional causes are different, and these higher plane causes determine the ultimate effect. Consider how this principle operates in your own life. When you experience an unwanted condition, financial difficulty, relationship conflict, health problems, professional setbacks, your first instinct is often to look for external causes: the economy, other people's behavior, bad luck, genetic predisposition. And certainly these external factors are part of the causal chain. But the principle of cause and effect, combined with the principle of mentalism, reveals that the deeper causes lie in your own consciousness, your habitual thoughts, your dominant emotions, your underlying beliefs and assumptions, your mental and emotional patterns that have been operating unconsciously for years or even decades. This is not about blame or guilt. It is about power and possibility. If your circumstances are caused by external factors beyond your control, then you are helpless to change them, except through external manipulation, which is often difficult or impossible. But if your circumstances are caused primarily by your own consciousness, then you have direct access to the cause and can change it from within. This is why the masters throughout history have focused on transforming consciousness rather than manipulating circumstances. They understood that consciousness is the primary plane of causation, the level at which the most powerful causes originate. The principle of cause and effect also reveals the true nature of what we call karma, a concept that has been widely misunderstood in popular culture. Karma is not a system of cosmic reward and punishment administered by an external judge. It is simply the law of cause and effect operating across time and across planes of existence. Every action you take, every thought you think, every emotion you feel sets up a cause that must eventually produce an effect. You are constantly creating your future through the causes you are generating in the present, and you are constantly experiencing the effects of causes you generated in the past. Think about how this principle reframes your understanding of responsibility and freedom. You are not free to escape the law of cause and effect. It operates with perfect precision at all times, but you are free to choose the causes you generate, and thereby to determine the effects you will experience. This is the true meaning of free will, not the ability to violate natural law, but the ability to consciously work with natural law to become a deliberate cause rather than an unconscious effect. The person who understands this principle stops asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and starts asking, "What causes have I been generating that are producing this effect? What different causes can I generate to produce different effects?" The ancient Hermeticists taught that most people live their lives on what they called the plane of effects, meaning that they are primarily experiencing the effects of causes generated by others or by their own unconscious patterns. They are reactive rather than proactive, responding to circumstances rather than creating them, at the mercy of forces they do not understand or control. The goal of Hermetic training was to rise to the plane of causes, to become a conscious generator of causes rather than an unconscious experiencer of effects. This does not mean that you stop experiencing effects. That is impossible. But it means that you are generating the causes that produce the effects you desire, rather than unconsciously generating causes that produce effects you do not want. Understanding the principle of cause and effect also illuminates the importance of patience and persistence in the process of transformation and manifestation. When you plant a seed, you do not see the plant immediately. There is a time lag between cause and effect, a period during which the cause is working invisibly beneath the surface to produce the effect. The same is true in the mental and emotional realms. When you begin to change your habitual thoughts and feelings, you are planting seeds of new causes, but these causes may take time to produce visible effects in your external circumstances. Many people give up during this lag time, thinking that their efforts are not working, not realizing that the causes they have generated are still working their way through the system toward manifestation. The principle also reveals why it is so important to be mindful of your thoughts, emotions, words, and actions at all times, because all of these are causes that will inevitably produce effects. You cannot think negative thoughts consistently and expect positive outcomes. You cannot speak words of limitation and expect experiences of expansion. You cannot act from fear and expect results of courage. Every cause contains within it the seed of its effect, and the effect will always be in harmony with the cause. This is why the masters emphasize the cultivation of consciousness as the primary spiritual work. By purifying and elevating your consciousness, you ensure that the causes you generate will produce effects that serve your highest good. Consider how this principle applies to the phenomenon of self-fulfilling prophecy, where your expectations about the future tend to create that future. This is not magic or mysticism. It is the principle of cause and effect in action. Your expectations are causes operating on the mental plane, and they generate effects both internally, shaping your perceptions, emotions, and behaviors, and externally, influencing how others respond to you and what opportunities you notice and pursue. The person who expects success generates causes that lead to success. The person who expects failure generates causes that lead to failure. The expectation itself is a powerful cause, and the universe, operating according to law, produces the corresponding effect. The principle of cause and effect also provides the key to understanding how to break negative patterns and cycles in your life. Every pattern is a chain of cause and effect. A particular thought leads to a particular emotion, which leads to a particular behavior, which produces a particular result, which reinforces the original thought, creating a self-perpetuating loop. To break the pattern, you must interrupt the chain at any point, but the most effective point of intervention is at the level of thought, because thought is the primary cause from which the rest of the chain flows. Change the thought, and you change the entire pattern. As you contemplate this principle, begin to observe the chains of cause and effect in your own life with greater awareness. Notice how your thoughts lead to emotions, how emotions lead to actions, how actions lead to results, how results feed back into thoughts. Notice how causes you generated in the past are producing effects in your present, and how causes you are generating now will produce effects in your future. Notice how you are constantly moving between the plane of causes and the plane of effects, sometimes consciously creating and sometimes unconsciously reacting. And most importantly, begin to take responsibility for the causes you are generating, recognizing that you are not a victim of circumstances, but a creator of them, not an effect, but a cause, not powerless, but powerful beyond measure. The seventh and final principle is the principle of gender. Gender is in everything. Everything has its masculine and feminine principles. Gender manifests on all planes. This principle reveals that creation requires the union of two complementary forces, or principles, that the Hermeticists called masculine and feminine, not in a biological or sexual sense, but in the sense of active and receptive, projective and generative, initiating and nurturing. The masculine principle is the principle of direction, of focused will, of projection and penetration. The feminine principle is the principle of reception, of nurturing and gestation, of bringing forth and manifesting. Neither principle is superior to the other. Both are necessary, and creation cannot occur without their cooperation. Understanding this principle is crucial for effective manifestation and conscious creation, because it reveals that having a desire or intention is not enough. You must also provide the conditions for that desire to gestate and develop before it can be born into physical reality. In the language of the principle of gender, the masculine principle is the conscious mind, the will, the focused intention that plants the seed of desire. The feminine principle is the subconscious mind, the imagination, the creative matrix that receives the seed, nurtures it, and brings it forth as manifest reality. Both are necessary. Neither alone is sufficient. Consider how this principle operates in the process of manifestation. You begin with a clear intention, a focused desire, a mental image of what you want to create. This is the masculine principle in action, the active force that initiates the creative process. But if you stop there, if you simply hold the intention without providing the conditions for its development, nothing will manifest. The seed has been planted, but it has not been received into fertile soil. It has not been watered and nurtured. It has not been given the time and space to gestate. This is where the feminine principle comes in. You must impress the intention upon your subconscious mind. You must charge it with emotion and feeling. You must maintain a receptive, nurturing attitude that allows the creative process to unfold in its own time and way. The ancient Hermeticists taught that the subconscious mind is the feminine principle within you, the creative womb in which all manifestation gestates before being born into physical reality. Your conscious mind, the masculine principle, cannot create directly. It can only impress ideas and intentions upon the subconscious, which then does the actual work of creation. This is why feeling is so crucial in manifestation. Feeling is the language of the subconscious, the way in which the conscious mind communicates with and impresses upon the creative matrix of the subconscious. A thought without feeling is a seed without soil. It cannot germinate and grow. Think about how this principle reframes your understanding of patience and trust in the creative process. Just as a woman cannot rush the gestation of a child, it takes 9 months regardless of how urgently she wants the baby to be born, so too, you cannot rush the gestation of your desires and intentions in the creative matrix of your subconscious mind. There is a natural rhythm and timing to manifestation, a period of invisible development that must occur before the visible result can emerge. The person who understands the principle of gender learns to trust this process, to maintain the masculine focus of intention while also cultivating the feminine qualities of receptivity, patience, and allowing. The principle of gender also explains why force and struggle are often counterproductive in the creative process. The masculine principle, when operating alone without the balance of the feminine, tends toward force, aggression, and impatience. It wants to make things happen, to control outcomes, to push and strain toward the goal. But this approach violates the feminine principle of receptivity and allowing, creating resistance and tension that actually impede the natural creative process. True creation requires a balance. The masculine clarity of intention combined with the feminine receptivity to guidance, the masculine focus of will combined with the feminine trust in timing, the masculine action combined with the feminine allowing. Consider how this principle operates in your relationships with others. Every relationship involves a dance between masculine and feminine energies, and both people contain both energies regardless of their biological sex. Sometimes you need to be in your masculine energy, assertive, directive, focused, initiating. Sometimes you need to be in your feminine energy, receptive, nurturing, flowing, responsive. Problems arise when one energy dominates completely or when the energies are out of balance. The healthiest relationships are those in which both people can move fluidly between masculine and feminine energies as the situation requires, where both the active and receptive principles are honored and expressed. The principle of gender also provides insight into the nature of creativity in all its forms. Whether you are creating a work of art, building a business, writing a book, or developing a new skill, the process requires both masculine and feminine energies. The masculine energy provides the vision, the intention, the structure, the discipline to show up and do the work. The feminine energy provides the inspiration, the intuition, the receptivity to ideas that come from beyond the conscious mind, the patience to allow the work to develop organically. Artists who try to create through masculine energy alone produce work that is technically proficient but lacks soul and depth. Artists who try to create through feminine energy alone produce work that is inspired but lacks form and structure. The greatest creativity emerges when both energies are in balance and cooperation. Understanding this principle also illuminates the importance of what might be called inspired action versus forced action. Inspired action emerges from the union of masculine and feminine energies. You have the clear intention and focused will of the masculine, but you are also receptive to guidance, intuition, and synchronicity from the feminine. You act with purpose and direction, but you also remain open to unexpected opportunities and alternate paths. Forced action, by contrast, is purely masculine. You have decided what must happen and how it must happen, and you are pushing forward with sheer willpower, regardless of feedback or guidance. While forced action can sometimes produce results, it is exhausting and often leads to outcomes that are less satisfying than what would have emerged through the balance of masculine and feminine energies. The ancient Hermeticists also taught that the principle of gender operates on all planes of existence, not just the physical. On the mental plane, thoughts, masculine, must be received and nurtured by the imagination, feminine, before they can manifest. On the spiritual plane, the will to evolve, masculine, must be balanced with surrender to the divine, feminine. On the emotional plane, the desire for specific feelings, masculine, must be balanced with acceptance of what is, feminine. In every realm and at every level, creation requires the cooperation of these two complementary principles. As you contemplate this principle, begin to observe the balance of masculine and feminine energies in your own life. Notice when you are operating primarily from the masculine, pushing, forcing, controlling, initiating, and when you are operating primarily from the feminine, receiving, allowing, trusting, nurturing. Notice how imbalance in either direction creates problems. Too much masculine energy leads to burnout, rigidity, and resistance. Too much feminine energy leads to passivity, lack of direction, and failure to act. The goal is not to eliminate either energy, but to develop both fully and to learn when each is appropriate, to become fluent in both languages, to dance between action and receptivity, between will and surrender, between focus and flow. Now that you understand the 7 principles individually, we must address the most common and fatal mistake that prevents people from effectively using this knowledge: the attempt to apply one principle in isolation while remaining ignorant of or inattentive to the others. The 7 Hermetic principles are not separate, independent laws that operate in isolation from one another. They are 7 aspects of a single unified system, 7 facets of one diamond, 7 keys that must be used together to unlock the full creative power of consciousness. To use one principle while ignoring the others is like trying to play a symphony by focusing on only one instrument, or trying to build a house by using only a hammer while ignoring all other tools. Consider the person who learns about the principle of cause and effect and decides to become a conscious creator, to rise from the plane of effects to the plane of causes. This is admirable and necessary, but if they do not also understand the principle of vibration, they will attempt to create from a vibrational state of fear, doubt, or unworthiness, and their efforts will fail because the universe responds to vibration, not to conscious intention alone. They will set causes in motion through their willpower and conscious actions, but these causes will be undermined by the unconscious causes they are generating through their dominant emotional vibration. The result will be frustration, confusion, and the false conclusion that the law does not work or that they lack the power to create. Or consider the person who learns about the principle of vibration and works diligently to maintain a high vibrational state through positive thinking and emotional management. This too is valuable, but if they do not also understand the principle of rhythm, they will be devastated when the inevitable downswing comes, when their vibration drops despite their best efforts, when the pendulum swings backward after swinging forward. They will interpret this natural rhythm as personal failure, as evidence that they are not strong enough or spiritual enough, and they may abandon their practice altogether just before the rhythm would have swung upward again. Without understanding rhythm, they cannot maintain the stability and persistence necessary for long-term transformation. Think about the person who understands the principle of mentalism and recognizes that the universe is mental, that consciousness creates reality, that their thoughts shape their experience. This is the foundation of all the other principles, but if they do not also understand the principle of gender, they will try to create through masculine will alone, through forced visualization and affirmation, without providing the feminine receptivity and gestation time necessary for manifestation. They will plant seeds with the masculine principle, but fail to nurture them with the feminine principle, and they will wonder why their mental creations never materialize into physical form. Or consider the person who learns about the principle of polarity and discovers that they can transmute negative states into positive ones by recognizing that opposites are simply different degrees of the same thing. This is a powerful tool, but if they do not also understand the principle of correspondence, they will try to change their external circumstances without changing their internal state, or they will change their internal state temporarily without recognizing that the external must also shift to correspond. They will experience brief transformations that do not last because they have not understood the bidirectional relationship between the inner and outer, the as above, so below, and as below, so above. The fatal mistake, then, is fragmentation, taking a holistic system and breaking it into isolated pieces, trying to use one principle as if it were the whole truth rather than one facet of a multidimensional truth. This fragmentation is natural and perhaps inevitable in the learning process. We must understand each principle individually before we can understand how they work together. But the danger comes when we stop at individual understanding and fail to move towards systemic understanding, when we become attached to one principle as the answer and neglect the others. Consider how this fragmentation manifests in popular spiritual and self-help teachings. The Law of Attraction movement emphasizes the principle of vibration, but often neglects the principles of rhythm and cause and effect, leading to teachings that promise instant manifestation without addressing the time lag between cause and effect or the natural rhythms of expansion and contraction. Positive thinking emphasizes the principle of mentalism, but often neglects the principle of polarity, leading to the suppression of negative emotions rather than their transmutation. Mindfulness emphasizes present moment awareness, but sometimes neglects the principle of cause and effect, leading to passive acceptance rather than active creation. None of these teachings are wrong, they are incomplete. They have taken one principle from the complete system and emphasized it, which can be useful for teaching and learning, but the student must eventually recognize that the single principle is only one key in a set of 7, and that all 7 must be used together for complete mastery. This is why the ancient Hermeticists taught the 7 principles as a unified system, rather than as separate laws, why they insisted that students must understand the whole before they could truly master any part. Think about a practical example of how the principles work together in the process of manifestation. You begin with a clear intention. This is the masculine aspect of the principle of gender, the active will that initiates creation. You charge this intention with emotion, raising your vibration to match the frequency of your desire. This is the principle of vibration in action. You impress this vibrating intention upon your subconscious mind through repetition and feeling. This is the feminine aspect of the principle of gender, the receptive matrix that gestates creation. You maintain this practice consistently over time, understanding that there is a natural rhythm of progress and plateau. This is the principle of rhythm. You recognize that your external circumstances will shift to correspond with your internal state. This is the principle of correspondence. You understand that you are generating causes that will inevitably produce effects, though there may be a time lag. This is the principle of cause and effect. And you recognize that any obstacles or negative states that arise are simply the lower pole of what you desire and can be transmuted through conscious attention. This is the principle of polarity. All 7 principles working together, each supporting and reinforcing the others, creating a complete system of conscious creation. The person who understands this systemic nature of the principles gains a power and effectiveness that far exceeds what is possible through the isolated use of any single principle. They are not just using one tool, they are using the complete toolkit. They are not just playing one note, they are playing the full symphony. They are not just seeing one facet of the diamond, They are seeing the whole diamond from multiple angles simultaneously. This is the difference between knowledge and wisdom, between information and understanding, between learning about the principles and actually mastering them. As you move forward in your study and practice of these principles, resist the temptation to latch onto one principle as the answer or the most important one. Each principle is essential. Each principle reveals a different aspect of how consciousness creates reality. Each principle provides a different tool for working with the mental universe. The question is not which principle is most important, but rather how to use all 7 together in a coordinated, systematic way. This requires patience, practice, and a willingness to hold complexity rather than reducing everything to simple formulas. The ancient masters understood that teaching these principles was a delicate balance. If they taught all 7 at once, students would be overwhelmed and confused, unable to grasp any of them clearly. But if they taught only 1 or 2, students would mistake the part for the whole and develop incomplete and therefore ineffective practices. The solution was to teach the principles sequentially, allowing students to master each one individually, but always emphasizing that the individual principles were parts of a larger whole that would eventually be revealed. This is the approach we have taken here. First establishing the foundation of mentalism, then building the architecture of the remaining 6 principles, and now, in this section, revealing how they all work together as a unified system. The fatal mistake of fragmentation is not just an intellectual error. It has practical consequences in your life and your ability to create the reality you desire. When you try to use one principle in isolation, you are like a person trying to drive a car by using only the accelerator while ignoring the steering wheel, the brakes, and the transmission. You will move forward, but you will not arrive at your intended destination, and you may crash along the way. The 7 principles are the complete operating system for conscious creation. Use them all together, and you become a master of reality. Use only 1 or 2, and you remain a talented amateur at best. As we prepare to reveal which of the 7 principles is the master key, hold this understanding. The master key is not the only key you need, nor is it a replacement for the other 6. It is called the master key because understanding it unlocks your ability to use all the other principles more effectively, because it provides the foundation and context within which the other principles make sense. But the master key still requires the other keys to function. It is first among equals, not a solitary solution. The goal is not to replace the 7 principles with one principle, but to understand how one principle underlies and empowers all the others. Now I will reveal to you the principle that the ancient Hermeticists considered the master key, the one law that, when truly understood and embodied, unlocks the conscious use of all the others. It is the principle of mentalism, the first principle, the foundational axiom that the all is mind. The universe is mental. This is the master key not because the other principles are unimportant or unnecessary, but because this principle governs the very substance and nature of reality itself, and all the other principles describe how that mental substance operates, how consciousness moves and creates, how mind manifests as form. Consider why this principle holds this supreme position. The principle of vibration teaches that everything vibrates. But what is vibrating? Consciousness, mind, mental substance. The principle of polarity teaches that everything has 2 poles, but what exists on that spectrum between the poles? Patterns of consciousness, degrees of mental vibration. The principle of rhythm teaches that everything flows in cycles, but what is flowing? The movement of consciousness through different states. The principle of cause and effect teaches that every cause produces an effect, but what is the primary cause of all effects? Consciousness, thought, mind. The principle of correspondence teaches that the inner and outer reflect each other, but why? Because both are made of the same mental substance, both are patterns within the one universal consciousness. The principle of gender teaches that creation requires masculine and feminine principles, but what is creating? Consciousness using its dual aspects to manifest form from the formless. Every single one of the other 6 principles is describing an aspect of how consciousness operates, how mind creates, how the mental universe unfolds, according to knowable patterns. Without the principle of mentalism as the foundation, The other principles are interesting observations about patterns in reality, but they do not reveal the underlying nature of that reality or give you access to the primary creative power. With the principle of mentalism as the foundation, the other principles become tools for working consciously with the mental substance of reality, keys for shaping consciousness and thereby shaping experience. Think about what this means for your practical ability to create and transform your reality. If the universe were fundamentally material, if consciousness were just a byproduct of physical processes, then your power to create would be limited to physical manipulation, to arranging matter and energy through physical effort. But if the universe is fundamentally mental, if consciousness is the primary reality and matter is secondary, then your power to create is limited only by your ability to work with consciousness itself. You can change vibration with your mind. You can transmute polarity with your mind. You can neutralize rhythm with your mind. You can become a conscious cause with your mind. You can establish correspondence with your mind. You can unite the masculine and feminine principles with your mind. The mind is not just one tool among many. It is the primary tool, the master tool, the tool that creates and controls all the others. The principle of mentalism is the master key, because it reveals that you are not a separate self trying to manipulate an external world. You are consciousness exploring itself, a focal point of the universal mind, experiencing a particular perspective within the infinite mental creation. This recognition fundamentally shifts your relationship to reality from one of separation and struggle to one of unity and flow. You are not fighting against reality. You are shaping reality from within, using the same substance and the same principles that create galaxies and atoms, that move planets and grow trees, that generate thoughts and manifest forms. Consider how this principle illuminates the true nature of what we call spiritual practice or personal development. All effective practices are ultimately practices of consciousness, methods for working directly with the mental substance of reality. Meditation is not about relaxing or escaping. It is about becoming conscious of consciousness itself, about recognizing the mental nature of experience. Visualization is not about creating fantasies. It is about using the creative power of consciousness to shape mental patterns that will eventually manifest as physical form. Affirmation is not about convincing yourself of lies. It is about impressing new patterns on the mental substance of your being. Every practice that truly works is working with the principle of mentalism, whether explicitly or implicitly. The ancient Hermeticists taught that the degree to which you understand and embody the principle of mentalism determines your level of mastery over reality. The person who does not understand this principle is at the mercy of the mental patterns they have unconsciously absorbed from their environment, from their culture, from their past experiences. They are creating their reality, but they are doing so unconsciously, reactively, by default. The person who intellectually understands this principle but has not deeply realized it is like someone who knows the theory of how to play an instrument but has never actually practiced. They have the knowledge but not the skill, the information but not the mastery. But the person who has truly realized the principle of mentalism, who has awakened to the mental nature of reality, not just as an idea but as a living experience, gains access to a level of creative power that seems miraculous to those who do not understand it. They can change their vibration at will because they recognize that vibration is a mental phenomenon. They can transmute negative states into positive ones because they recognize that both are patterns within consciousness. They can maintain stability through the rhythms of life because they have established themselves in the awareness of consciousness itself, which is prior to and unaffected by the rhythms that play across its surface. They can become a conscious cause rather than an unconscious effect, because they recognize that causation originates in consciousness and flows from there into form. Think about the implications of this principle for understanding the nature of suffering and liberation. Suffering arises when you forget the mental nature of reality and identify with the contents of consciousness rather than with consciousness itself. You think you are your thoughts, your emotions, your circumstances, your body, your story, and because these are all subject to change, to rhythm, to polarity, to cause and effect, you suffer as they change. But when you realize that you are the consciousness in which all these phenomena arise, when you recognize that your true nature is the mental substance itself rather than any particular pattern within that substance, suffering loses its grip. You still experience pain, challenges, difficulties. These are part of the rhythms of existence, but you are no longer identified with them, no longer at their mercy, no longer defined by them. The principle of mentalism is also the key to understanding the relationship between individual and universal consciousness, between the personal self and what might be called God, or the Absolute, or the All. You are not separate from the universal consciousness. You are a focal point within it, a localized expression of it, a way in which the infinite consciousness experiences itself from a particular perspective. This means that the creative power of the universal consciousness is not something external to you that you must petition or manipulate. It is your own deepest nature, the substance of your being, the ground of your existence. When you align your individual consciousness with the universal consciousness, when your thoughts and feelings and intentions resonate with the creative patterns of the All, you tap into a power that is infinite, because you are no longer operating as a separate self, but as an expression of the whole. Understanding the principle of mentalism also reveals why certain spiritual teachings emphasize the importance of knowing yourself, or self-realization. These phrases are not about understanding your personality or your life story. They are about recognizing your true nature as consciousness itself, as the mental substance in which all experience arises. When you know yourself in this way, you know the nature of reality, because you and reality are made of the same substance. The boundary between self and world, between subject and object, between consciousness and its contents, is revealed as a conceptual division imposed on the seamless wholeness of mental reality. As you contemplate this principle as the master key, do not make the mistake of thinking that understanding it intellectually is the same as mastering it experientially. The principle of mentalism is not just a belief or a theory. It is a recognition, a realization, an awakening that must occur within your own consciousness. You cannot think your way to this realization through logic alone, though logic can point the way. You cannot force this realization through willpower, though intention can prepare the ground. This realization comes through direct experience, through practices that allow you to become conscious of consciousness itself, through moments of insight when the mental nature of reality becomes transparent to your awareness. The ancient masters provided many methods for cultivating this realization. Meditation practices that quiet the contents of consciousness so you can become aware of consciousness itself. Contemplation practices that direct attention toward the nature of awareness rather than toward the objects of awareness. Inquiry practices that systematically deconstruct the illusion of separation between self and reality. All of these methods are designed to facilitate the direct recognition of the mental nature of existence, to help you move from knowing about the principle of mentalism to knowing it, from thinking about consciousness to being conscious of consciousness. The principle of mentalism is the master key because it is both the beginning and the end of the spiritual journey. It is the first principle you learn, the foundation upon which all other understanding rests. But it is also the ultimate realization, the final recognition that comes after years or lifetimes of practice and refinement. You begin by intellectually understanding that the universe is mental. You end by directly realizing that you are that universal mind experiencing itself, that there is no separation between consciousness and its contents, between the dreamer and the dream, between the all and the individual. This is not a contradiction. It is a spiral of understanding that returns to the same point, but at a higher level of integration and embodiment. As we move forward into the validation section, where we will see how all the great masters have been teaching these same principles in different words and from different perspectives, hold this recognition. The principle of mentalism is not just one teaching among many. It is the teaching that underlies all authentic spiritual and metaphysical systems. Every master who has truly understood the nature of reality has recognized its mental nature, has taught methods for working with consciousness, has emphasized the primacy of mind over matter, of thought over form, of the inner over the outer. The words differ, The cultural contexts vary, the specific practices change, but the core recognition remains constant. The all is mind, and you are that mind experiencing itself. This is the master key that unlocks all the others, and it has been waiting for you to claim it since the beginning of time. Now that you understand the 7 Hermetic principles as a complete system, with the principle of mentalism as the master key, you are ready to see how these principles form the hidden foundation beneath the teachings of all the great masters you may have studied. What you have been learning from Neville Goddard, Wallace Wattles, Joseph Murphy, and others was never separate or contradictory teachings. They were all drawing from the same ancient wellspring, all describing the same fundamental laws of consciousness, using different language and emphasizing different aspects. The Kybalion provides you with the source code, the underlying operating system that makes sense of all the individual programs and applications you have been running. Consider Neville Goddard, perhaps the most profound teacher of mental creation in the 20th century, whose entire body of work can be summarized in his statement, "Consciousness is the only reality." This is the principle of mentalism, stated with perfect clarity and directness. When Neville teaches that your consciousness creates your reality, that imagination is the creative power of the universe, that you are God imagining yourself into existence, he is teaching the first Hermetic principle. When he emphasizes the importance of feeling, of living in the end, of assuming the feeling of the wish fulfilled, he is teaching you to work with the principle of vibration, to match your emotional vibration to the frequency of your desire. When he speaks of revision, of going back and changing past events in imagination, he is teaching you to work with the principle of cause and effect, recognizing that the past is not fixed, but is a mental creation that can be altered. Neville's teaching method itself demonstrates the principle of correspondence, as within, so without. He constantly emphasizes that you must change your inner state, your consciousness, your imagination, and the outer world will conform to match. He understood that trying to change circumstances directly is futile. You must change the inner cause, and the outer effect will follow inevitably. When Neville teaches about the Sabbath, about the importance of resting and the assumption that your desire is already fulfilled, he is teaching you to work with the principle of gender. The masculine principle plants the seed through focused imagination, but the feminine principle requires rest and gestation time for the seed to grow and manifest. Think about Wallace D. Wattles and his classic work, The Science of Getting Rich, which has influenced countless teachers and students of prosperity consciousness. Wattles speaks of thinking stuff, an intelligent substance that permeates all of space and from which all things are made. This thinking stuff is the mental substance described in the principle of mentalism. Wattles is teaching that the universe is made of consciousness, that mind is the primary reality. When he teaches that you must think in a certain way, holding clear images of what you want with unwavering faith and gratitude, he is teaching you to work with the principles of vibration and cause and effect. Your thoughts are causes that will produce corresponding effects, and the vibration of your thoughts determines what you attract. Wattles emphasizes the importance of acting in a certain way, as well as thinking in a certain way, which demonstrates his understanding of the principle of gender. The masculine principle provides the vision and intention, but the feminine principle requires action, the physical movement that allows the mental creation to manifest in the material world. When Wattles teaches that you must give more in use value than you receive in cash value, he is teaching the principle of rhythm and the principle of cause and effect. What you give out will flow back to you, and by giving abundantly, you set up a rhythm of abundance that will return to you in kind. Consider Joseph Murphy and his teachings on the power of the subconscious mind. Murphy understood that the subconscious is the creative medium, the feminine principle that receives the seeds of thought from the conscious mind and brings them forth as manifest reality. This is the principle of gender applied to the structure of the individual mind. The conscious mind is masculine, directive, selective. The subconscious mind is feminine, receptive, creative. Murphy taught that you must impress your desires upon the subconscious through repetition, feeling, and the state just before sleep, when the conscious mind relaxes its control and the subconscious becomes more receptive. This is practical application of the principle of gender, combined with the principle of vibration. Murphy also understood the principle of polarity, teaching that you can neutralize negative thoughts and emotions not by fighting them, but by replacing them with their positive opposites. Fear and faith are two poles of the same thing. You move from fear to faith by changing the degree of vibration, by consciously choosing to focus on the higher pole rather than the lower. Murphy's emphasis on affirmations and prayer is a method for impressing new patterns on the subconscious mind, for changing the mental causes that produce your experience. This is the principle of cause and effect in action. Change the cause in consciousness, and the effect in experience must follow. Think about the popular teaching known as the Law of Attraction, which has been presented by many teachers and in many forms. At its core, the Law of Attraction is a description of the principle of vibration. Like attracts like. Your emotional and mental vibration attracts circumstances and experiences that match that vibration. But the Law of Attraction, as commonly taught, is often incomplete because it focuses primarily on the principle of vibration while neglecting the other principles. This is why so many people report that the Law of Attraction doesn't work for them. They are trying to use one principle in isolation without understanding how it interacts with the principles of rhythm, cause and effect, gender, and the others. The complete teaching of the Law of Attraction, when properly understood, includes all 7 Hermetic principles. You must understand that the universe is mental, mentalism, that your inner state corresponds to your outer circumstances, correspondence, that your vibration attracts matching experiences, vibration, that negative states can be transmuted into positive ones, polarity, that there are natural rhythms of expansion and contraction, rhythm, that you are generating causes that will produce effects, cause and effect, and that manifestation requires both the masculine principle of clear, intention, and the feminine principle of receptive allowing, gender. When all 7 principles are understood and applied together, the Law of Attraction becomes not a hit or miss technique, but a reliable method for conscious creation. Consider also the teachings of the great Eastern masters, though they use different terminology and cultural frameworks. The Buddhist teaching of mind only or consciousness only is the principle of mentalism. The Hindu teaching of Maya, that the physical world is illusion, does not mean that the world does not exist, but rather that its true nature is mental rather than material. Again, the principle of mentalism. The Taoist teaching of yin and yang is the principle of polarity, recognizing that opposites are complementary aspects of a unified whole. The teaching of karma is the principle of cause and effect, the recognition that every action produces a corresponding reaction, every cause generates an effect. The ancient Greek philosophers also understood these principles, though they expressed them in their own language. Plato's teaching of the forms, that the physical world is a shadow of a higher reality, is pointing toward the principle of mentalism. The higher reality is mental, and the physical is its reflection. Aristotle's teaching of potentiality and actuality is related to the principle of gender. Potentiality is the feminine principle, the receptive matrix. Actuality is the masculine principle, the active manifestation. The Stoic teaching of living according to nature, of accepting what you cannot control while mastering what you can, is an application of the principles of rhythm and cause and effect. Think about how this recognition of the universal nature of these principles validates your study and practice. You are not learning some obscure or questionable teaching. You are learning the fundamental laws of consciousness that have been recognized and taught by the greatest minds throughout human history. The specific words differ, the cultural contexts vary, the emphasis shifts from one principle to another depending on the teacher and the audience, but the core recognition remains constant. Reality is fundamentally mental, consciousness is the primary creative power, and by understanding and working with the laws of consciousness, you can transform your experience from within. This validation is not just intellectual, it has practical implications for how you approach your own practice and development. When you encounter a teaching that resonates with you, you can now understand it within the framework of the 7 Hermetic principles. You can identify which principles the teaching emphasizes, which principles it assumes but does not explicitly state, and which principles might be missing that you need to add from your own understanding. This allows you to extract the essence from any teaching, to separate the eternal principles from the cultural packaging, to integrate insights from multiple sources into a coherent personal practice. The recognition that all authentic teachings point toward the same fundamental principles also protects you from the confusion and contradiction that can arise when you study multiple teachers. It is easy to become lost in the apparent differences between teachings, to think that one teacher contradicts another, to wonder which approach is right. But when you understand the 7 Hermetic principles as the underlying framework, you see that the differences are usually differences in emphasis or language rather than fundamental contradictions. One teacher emphasizes vibration, another emphasizes mentalism, another emphasizes gender, but they are all describing aspects of the same unified system. Consider how this understanding also helps you recognize teachings that are incomplete or distorted. If a teaching promises instant results without acknowledging the principle of rhythm, you know it is incomplete. If a teaching emphasizes positive thinking without addressing the principle of cause and effect, you know it is missing something crucial. If a teaching focuses entirely on external techniques without recognizing the principle of mentalism, you know it is working at the level of effects rather than causes. The 7 principles become a touchstone, a standard against which you can evaluate any teaching you encounter. The ancient Hermeticists predicted that their teachings would be rediscovered and reformulated by each generation, that the eternal principles would be expressed in new language appropriate to new times and cultures. This is exactly what has happened. The modern teachers of consciousness manifestation and personal development are not inventing new truths. They are rediscovering and reformulating the ancient wisdom, making it accessible to contemporary audiences, demonstrating its relevance to modern challenges. The Kybalion itself is an example of this process. It took the ancient Hermetic teachings and presented them in a form appropriate for the early 20th century. And now, in the 21st century, you are receiving these same teachings again, refined and clarified for your time and your circumstances. As you move forward in your study and practice, remember that you are part of an unbroken lineage of seekers and masters stretching back thousands of years. You are not alone in this work. You are connected to every person who has ever recognized the mental nature of reality and sought to work consciously with the laws of consciousness. The specific challenges you face may be unique to your time and place, but the fundamental principles you are learning are eternal and universal. They worked for the ancient Egyptians, for the Greek philosophers, for the Renaissance alchemists, for the modern metaphysical teachers, and they will work for you not because they are beliefs or theories, but because they are accurate descriptions of how consciousness actually operates. The validation you have received in this section is not meant to be an appeal to authority, as if the truth of the principles depends on how many famous teachers have taught them. The principles are true because they accurately describe your experience when you test them, because they produce results when you apply them, because they make sense of patterns in your life that were previously mysterious. The fact that all the great masters have taught these same principles in different forms is simply confirmation, a reassurance that you are on a well-traveled path, that countless others have walked this way before you and found it to be true. Now it is your turn to test these principles in the laboratory of your own consciousness, to verify them through your own experience, to become not just a student of the masters, but a master yourself. To make the 7 Hermetic principles even more concrete and accessible, let us walk through a simple but powerful example that demonstrates how all 7 principles work together in a practical situation. Imagine that you have been struggling with fear, perhaps fear of failure, fear of rejection, fear of not being good enough. This fear has been dominating your emotional life, influencing your decisions, limiting your actions, and creating circumstances that reinforce the very thing you fear. You want to transmute this fear into courage, to transform your experience from limitation to empowerment. How do you do this? Using the 7 principles as a unified system. You begin with the principle of mentalism, recognizing that this fear is not an external reality, but a pattern within your consciousness. The fear feels very real, very powerful, very solid, but it is ultimately a mental creation, a thought pattern charged with emotion, a vibration in consciousness. This recognition is crucial because it means you have the power to change the fear. You are not at the mercy of external circumstances or fixed internal conditions. The fear exists in the realm of mind, and mind can be transformed through understanding and practice. You are not trying to fight against reality. You are recognizing that what you call reality is a mental creation that can be recreated differently. Next, you apply the principle of polarity, recognizing that fear and courage are not opposite things, but different degrees of the same thing, two poles on a single spectrum. The energy you feel as fear is the same energy that, at a higher vibration, becomes courage. You are not trying to eliminate fear or pretend it does not exist. You are learning to transmute it, to raise its vibration, to move it from the lower pole to the higher pole. This is done not through force or suppression, but through conscious attention and intention. You acknowledge the fear, you feel it fully, and then you consciously choose to shift your focus toward the higher pole, toward courage, toward the feeling of strength and capability that exists at the opposite end of the spectrum. You then use the principle of vibration to implement this transmutation practically. You recognize that fear is a low vibration, a heavy, contracting, limiting frequency in your consciousness. Courage is a high vibration, an expansive, empowering, freeing frequency. To transmute fear into courage, you must consciously raise your vibration. You do this through multiple methods. You focus your attention on thoughts that evoke courage rather than fear. You recall past experiences when you acted courageously. You imagine future scenarios in which you are strong and capable. You use your body, standing tall, breathing deeply, moving with confidence, to signal to your consciousness that you are in a state of courage rather than fear. All of these practices are working with vibration, consciously choosing to resonate at a higher frequency. Now you apply the principle of correspondence, recognizing that as you change your inner state from fear to courage, your outer circumstances must eventually shift to correspond. You do not wait for external circumstances to change before you feel courageous. You generate the internal state of courage first, knowing that the external must follow. You notice that as your inner vibration shifts, people respond to you differently. Opportunities appear that were not visible before. Obstacles that seemed insurmountable become manageable. This is not magic. It is the natural operation of the principle of correspondence. Your outer world is a mirror of your inner world, and as the inner changes, the outer must reflect that change. You then work with the principle of rhythm, recognizing that this transmutation from fear to courage will not be a straight line, but will involve natural cycles of progress and regression. Some days, you will feel strong and courageous. Other days, the fear will return and you will feel weak. This is not failure, this is the natural rhythm of consciousness as it moves through different states. The key is not to be discouraged by the backward swing of the pendulum, but to maintain your practice consistently, knowing that the rhythm will swing forward again. You learn to polarize yourself at the point of courage, establishing that as your baseline, even as the surface of your consciousness moves through its natural rhythms. Over time, the amplitude of the swing decreases. The peaks are less extreme and the valleys are less deep, until courage becomes your dominant state. You apply the principle of cause and effect by recognizing that every time you choose courage over fear, every time you act from strength rather than weakness, you are generating a cause that will produce effects. These effects accumulate over time, creating new patterns in your consciousness and new circumstances in your life. You are not just feeling differently in the moment, you are reshaping the causal structure of your being, creating new pathways in your consciousness that will make courage easier and more natural in the future. You understand that there may be a time lag between cause and effect, that the full results of your practice may not be visible immediately, but you trust the law and maintain your practice with patience and persistence. Finally, you work with the principle of gender, recognizing that this transmutation requires both masculine and feminine energies. The masculine energy provides the clear intention to transform fear into courage, the focused will that initiates the practice, the disciplined action that maintains the practice even when you do not feel like it. The feminine energy provides the receptivity to guidance and intuition, the patience to allow the transformation to unfold in its own time, the nurturing attention that supports the new pattern of courage as it gestates in your consciousness. You do not force the transformation through sheer willpower alone. You also allow it, trust it, create the conditions for it to emerge naturally. You plant the seed of courage with the masculine principle and nurture it with the feminine principle, and in time it grows and bears fruit. This simple example demonstrates how all 7 principles work together as a unified system to create transformation. You are not using one principle in isolation. You are using all 7 simultaneously, each one supporting and reinforcing the others. The principle of mentalism provides the foundation, the recognition that you are working with consciousness itself. The principle of correspondence ensures that inner change produces outer change. The principle of vibration provides the mechanism for transmutation. The principle of polarity reveals that fear and courage are not opposites, but degrees. The principle of rhythm prevents discouragement during the natural cycles of progress. The principle of cause and effect ensures that your practice produces cumulative results. The principle of gender balances action and allowing, will and surrender, focus and flow. Now imagine applying this same systematic approach to any challenge or goal in your life. Want to transform scarcity into abundance? Use the 7 principles. Want to transform loneliness into connection? Use the 7 principles. Want to transform confusion into clarity? Use the 7 principles. Want to transform sickness into health? Use the 7 principles. The specific content changes, but the process remains the same. Recognize the mental nature of the challenge, identify the polarity you want to transmute, raise your vibration, establish inner-outer correspondence, work with the natural rhythms, generate new causes, and balance masculine and feminine energies. This is the complete technology of consciousness, the full operating system for deliberate creation. The beauty of this systematic approach is that it takes the mystery and confusion out of transformation. You are no longer wondering why some things work and others do not, why progress is sometimes easy and sometimes difficult, why results are sometimes quick and sometimes slow. You understand the laws that govern the process, and you can work with those laws consciously rather than unconsciously. You become a scientist of consciousness, conducting experiments in the laboratory of your own awareness, observing the results, refining your practice, accumulating mastery through understanding and application. As you contemplate this example and begin to apply the 7 principles systematically in your own life, remember that mastery comes through practice, not just through understanding. You can intellectually grasp how the principles work together, but until you actually use them, until you test them in real situations, until you experience their power directly, they remain abstract concepts rather than living tools. The ancient Hermeticists did not just teach these principles, they practiced them daily, making them the foundation of their entire approach to life. This is what you are called to do now, not just to learn about the principles, but to live them, to make them so habitual and natural that you use them automatically, unconsciously, as your default way of engaging with reality. We have journeyed together through the 7 Hermetic principles, from the foundational recognition that the universe is mental to the understanding of how all 7 principles work together as a unified system. Now it is time to synthesize this knowledge into a coherent vision of what becomes possible when you truly master these principles, when you move from intellectual understanding to embodied wisdom, when you transform from a student of the laws to a master of reality. The synthesis of power that emerges from this mastery is not about gaining control over others or manipulating circumstances for selfish ends. It is about reclaiming your birthright as a conscious creator, about stepping into the fullness of your potential as a focal point of the infinite consciousness. When you master the 7 principles, you gain the ability to consciously navigate the mental universe with precision and grace. You are no longer buffeted by circumstances, no longer at the mercy of unconscious patterns, no longer confused by the apparent chaos of events. You see the hidden order beneath the surface appearance. You recognize the lawful patterns that govern all manifestation. You understand that nothing happens by chance, and that you are constantly participating in the creation of your experience, whether you realize it or not. This recognition brings both power and responsibility. Power because you can now work with the laws consciously. Responsibility because you can no longer blame external forces for your circumstances. The synthesis of power means that you become fluent in the language of consciousness, able to read the signs and symbols that the universe is constantly presenting to you. Every circumstance becomes a message. Every challenge becomes an opportunity. Every obstacle becomes a teacher showing you where your consciousness needs to evolve. You stop seeing yourself as a victim of reality and start seeing yourself as a participant in an ongoing creative process, a co-creator working in partnership with the infinite intelligence that underlies all existence. This shift in perspective is itself transformative, changing not just how you think about your life, but how you experience it moment by moment. When the 7 principles become second nature to you, you develop what might be called conscious flexibility, the ability to move fluidly between different mental states, different vibrational frequencies, different points on the various spectrums and polarities. You are not rigidly fixed in any single state or pattern. You can consciously choose the state that serves your purpose in any given moment. You can raise your vibration when you need energy and enthusiasm, lower it when you need rest and reflection. You can polarize yourself at courage when facing a challenge, at peace when navigating conflict, at abundance when dealing with scarcity. You can move with the rhythms of life, rather than fighting against them, recognizing when to push forward and when to rest, when to act and when to allow. This mastery also brings a profound sense of inner stability and peace, not because your external circumstances become perfect, they never do, but because you are no longer dependent on external circumstances for your sense of well-being. You have established yourself in the awareness of consciousness itself, which is prior to and unaffected by the changing contents of consciousness. The storms may rage on the surface, but you remain centered in the depths, observing the play of phenomena with interest and engagement, but without being swept away by them. This is the true meaning of equanimity, not indifference or detachment, but a stable awareness that can hold all experience without being destabilized by it. The message of empowerment that emerges from understanding the 7 Hermetic principles is both simple and profound. The principles are always in operation, governing the unfolding of reality at every moment, whether you are aware of them or not. You cannot break these laws any more than you can break the law of gravity. They are fundamental aspects of how the mental universe operates. But you can choose whether to work in harmony with them or in opposition to them, whether to use them consciously or to be used by them unconsciously, whether to become a master of the game or to remain a pawn moved by forces you do not understand. Today, in this moment, you have been given the rulebook. You now possess knowledge that has been sought by seekers and mystics throughout human history, wisdom that was once guarded jealously by mystery schools and initiatic orders, principles that unlock the very source code of reality. This knowledge is not given to make you feel special or superior. It is given to empower you, to remind you of what you have always been but may have forgotten, to awaken you to the creative power that lies dormant within your own consciousness. You are not receiving something new. You are remembering something ancient, recognizing what you have always known at the deepest level of your being. The empowerment lies in the recognition that you have a choice. You can continue to live as you have been living, unconsciously creating your experience through habitual patterns of thought and emotion, reacting to circumstances rather than creating them, being pulled by the rhythms and polarities without understanding what is happening. There is no judgment in this choice. The universe does not punish you for unconsciousness. But there is consequence. Unconscious creation produces unconscious results, random patterns, experiences that seem to happen to you rather than through you. The quality of your life when you are unconscious is determined by the quality of the mental patterns you have absorbed from your environment, from your culture, from your past, and these patterns are often limiting, fearful, and disempowering. Or you can choose to wake up, to become conscious, to learn the rules of the game and start playing deliberately rather than by default. This choice requires effort, practice, and a willingness to take responsibility for your experience. It requires that you give up the comfort of victimhood, the easy excuse that your circumstances are someone else's fault or the result of bad luck. It requires that you face the sometimes uncomfortable truth that you have been participating in the creation of everything you have experienced, that your consciousness has been the primary cause of your life conditions. But this uncomfortable truth is also the key to your liberation, because if you have been creating unconsciously, you can learn to create consciously. If your past consciousness created your current circumstances, your present consciousness can create your future circumstances. The empowerment also lies in understanding that the universe is not against you, not punishing you, not testing you to see if you are worthy. The universe is simply responding to the signals you are broadcasting, matching your vibration with corresponding experiences, reflecting your inner state in your outer circumstances, operating according to laws that are perfectly neutral and impersonal. When you understand this, you stop feeling like a victim of cosmic injustice and start feeling like a student learning a skill. You are not being punished when things go wrong. You are receiving feedback about the state of your consciousness. You are not being rewarded when things go right. You are experiencing the natural result of conscious alignment with the principles. Think about what this means for how you approach challenges and difficulties in your life. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" you can ask, "What is this showing me about my consciousness? What pattern am I maintaining that is creating this experience? What principle am I violating or misunderstanding?" These questions transform you from a passive victim to an active investigator, from someone who suffers circumstances to someone who learns from them. Every challenge becomes a teacher. Every difficulty becomes an opportunity to refine your understanding and practice of the principles. The universe is not punishing you with challenges. It is educating you, showing you where your consciousness needs to evolve, providing you with the exact experiences you need to grow into mastery. The message of empowerment also includes the recognition that you do not need to be perfect to begin using these principles effectively. You do not need to have completely mastered your thoughts and emotions. You do not need to be free of fear and doubt. You do not need to have achieved some exalted state of consciousness before you can start creating consciously. You start where you are with whatever level of understanding and skill you currently possess, and you practice. Every time you consciously raise your vibration, every time you transmute a negative state into a positive one, every time you maintain your center through the backward swing of the pendulum, every time you act as a cause rather than reacting as an effect, you are strengthening your mastery. Mastery is not a destination you arrive at. It is a direction you move in, a practice you maintain, a commitment you renew each day. Understanding the 7 principles also empowers you by revealing that you are never alone in this work. You are part of a vast community of consciousness, connected to every other being through the one universal mind. The same principles that operate in your individual consciousness operate in the collective consciousness, in the consciousness of humanity, in the consciousness of the planet, in the consciousness of the cosmos. When you raise your own vibration, you contribute to the raising of the collective vibration. When you transmute your own fear into courage, you make it easier for others to do the same. When you establish yourself as a conscious cause, you inspire others to claim their own creative power. Your individual work is never just personal, it ripples outward, affecting the larger field of consciousness in ways you may never directly perceive, but that are nonetheless real and significant. The empowerment culminates in the recognition that the universe is not a hostile place you must struggle against, but a friendly place that is waiting for you to learn its language, to understand its laws, to work in harmony with its patterns. The universe wants you to succeed, to thrive, to express the fullness of your potential. Not because it has preferences or desires in the human sense, but because your success, your thriving, your full expression is the universe experiencing itself, the infinite consciousness exploring its own possibilities through your particular focal point. When you align with the principles, when you work with the laws rather than against them, you are not forcing the universe to bend to your will. You are flowing with the universe's own creative impulse, allowing it to express through you in ways that bring joy, fulfillment, and contribution. Now we arrive at the final challenge, the invitation to move from understanding to action, from knowledge to practice, from passive reception to active engagement. I propose to you the Principle Observer Challenge, a simple but powerful practice that will begin to train your consciousness to see the hidden order in reality, to recognize the principles in operation all around you and within you. For one day, just 24 hours, choose one of the 7 Hermetic principles that most intrigues you or that you most need to understand more deeply. It might be vibration if you struggle with emotional states, or rhythm if you are frustrated by the ups and downs of life, or cause and effect if you feel powerless, or any of the others. Your only task for this day is to consciously look for examples of your chosen principle playing out in your life and in the world around you. This is not about forcing yourself to see things that are not there or interpreting everything through a narrow lens. It is about paying attention, about becoming observant, about training your awareness to recognize patterns that have always been present but that you have not been conscious of. When you choose vibration, notice how your emotional state affects the responses you get from others, how a shift in your mood seems to shift the quality of your experiences. When you choose rhythm, notice the natural cycles in your energy, your motivation, your circumstances. When you choose correspondence, notice how your inner state is reflected in your outer environment. This practice serves multiple purposes. First, it trains your mind to see reality through the lens of the principles, to recognize that these are not abstract theories, but accurate descriptions of how experience actually unfolds. Second, it begins to make the principles intuitive and automatic, rather than intellectual and effortful. The more you practice observing the principles in action, the more naturally you will begin to work with them consciously. Third, it demonstrates to you empirically that these principles are real and reliable, that they operate with consistency and predictability, that you can count on them as you would count on any natural law. Fourth, it begins to shift your consciousness from passive to active, from unconscious to conscious, from effect to cause. After you complete your day of principle observation, share what you discovered. Comment below with specific examples of how you saw your chosen principle operating in your life. What surprised you? What became clear that was previously hidden? What new possibilities opened up when you began to see reality through this lens? Your sharing serves multiple purposes. It reinforces your own learning by articulating what you observed. It contributes to the collective understanding by adding your unique perspective and examples, and it inspires and educates others who are on the same journey. We are not isolated individuals struggling alone. We are a community of consciousness explorers, sharing our discoveries and supporting each other's growth. But the Principle Observer Challenge is just the beginning, the first step on a much longer journey. Once you have spent a day consciously observing one principle, you can do the same with each of the others, building a comprehensive understanding of how all 7 principles operate in your experience. Then you can begin to observe how the principles interact with each other, how they form a unified system rather than separate laws. Eventually, this conscious observation becomes so habitual that you do it automatically, without effort, as your natural way of engaging with reality. You become someone who sees the hidden order in apparent chaos, who recognizes the lawful patterns beneath the random surface, who understands that nothing happens by chance and everything happens for a reason, not a moral or personal reason, but a lawful causal reason that can be understood and worked with. The final call to action is to subscribe to this channel, to join the Master's legacy, to become part of a community dedicated to understanding and applying the fundamental principles of consciousness. This is not just about collecting information or accumulating knowledge. It is about transformation, about becoming someone different, about evolving from unconscious reactor to conscious creator. Every video on this channel is designed to deepen your understanding of how consciousness works, how reality operates, how you can move from being at the mercy of circumstances to being the master of your experience. The masters whose teachings we explore, Neville Goddard, Wallace Wattles, Joseph Murphy, and others, were all working with these same principles. and by studying their teachings through the lens of the 7 Hermetic principles, you gain a unified understanding that is more powerful than any single teaching alone. If you are ready to learn the fundamental rules of reality, if you are prepared to move from chance to mastery, if you are willing to take responsibility for your experience and claim your power as a conscious creator, then this is your path. The journey will not always be easy. There will be challenges, setbacks, moments of doubt and confusion. But every step forward is worth it, because you are not just improving your circumstances. You are evolving your consciousness. You are becoming who you truly are. You are awakening to your nature as a focal point of the infinite creative intelligence that underlies all existence. The ancient Hermeticists who first formulated these 7 principles did so not as an intellectual exercise, but as a practical guide for living, a roadmap for the evolution of consciousness, a technology for transformation. They understood that humanity would go through periods of forgetting and remembering, that the knowledge would be lost and rediscovered, that each generation would need to translate the eternal principles into the language and context of their time. We are now in such a period of remembering, when the ancient wisdom is being rediscovered and reformulated for our modern world, when the source code of reality is being revealed to those who have eyes to see and ears to hear. You have been given the keys to the kingdom, the master blueprint for conscious creation, the complete operating system for the mental universe. What you do with this knowledge is up to you. You can treat it as interesting information, file it away in your mind and continue living as you have been living. Or you can recognize it for what it is, a profound gift, a sacred trust, a call to awakening, and commit yourself to the practice and mastery of these principles. The choice is yours, and the choice is made not once but continuously, in every moment, through every thought, through every emotion, through every action. The universe is waiting for you to wake up within it, to recognize your own creative power, to claim your birthright as a conscious participant in the ongoing creation of reality. The game has always been mental. The rules have always been the 7 Hermetic principles, and now you know the rules. The question is no longer whether you can play the game successfully. You can, because the principles work for everyone who applies them consistently and correctly. The question is whether you will choose to play consciously, deliberately, masterfully, or whether you will continue to play unconsciously, reactively, randomly. The game continues either way, but the quality of your experience, the depth of your fulfillment, the scope of your contribution, all of this depends on your choice. Welcome to the path of mastery. Welcome to the community of conscious creators. Welcome home to the recognition of your true nature as consciousness itself, as the mental substance in which all experience arises, as a focal point of the infinite mind that is dreaming the universe into being. The journey has just begun, and every step forward is a step toward the full realization of your potential, the complete expression of your power, the ultimate recognition that you and the universe are not two but one, that the dreamer and the dream are the same, that the all is mind and you are that mind experiencing itself. This is the secret that has been hidden in plain sight for millennia, and now it is yours. Use it wisely, practice it diligently, share it generously, and watch as your life transforms from chaos to order, from chance to mastery, from unconscious reaction to conscious creation.